Imagine a storm-swept manor on the desolate Yorkshire moors, where secrets lurk in every shadow, and no one is who they seem. A scream pierces the night. The priceless blackthorn sapphire, a cursed family heirloom, has vanished from a locked safe. Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective, steps into a web of deception, where a glamorous actress, a secretive scholar, a disgraced colonel, and a bitter heir all hide dangerous truths. Was the theft a simple crime of greed, or the key to a deadly treasure hunt tied to a smuggler's legacy? Poison laces, champagne, gunshots, echo, and hidden passages reveal cryptic clues. Poirot's sharp mind unravels a chilling conspiracy. Who is the mastermind pulling the strings? What dark secrets does Blackthorn Manor guard? And can Poirot solve the puzzle before the killer strikes again? In 10 gripping chapters, loyalties shift, motives unravel, and the truth emerges in a final, shocking revelation that will leave you questioning the cost of greed and the power of a single, brilliant mind. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the windows of Hercule Poirot's modest yet impeccably tidy London flat. The Belgian detective sat in his favorite armchair, a cup of steaming tisane cradled in his hands, its delicate herbal aroma curling through the air. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room, where every surface gleamed with the precision of a man who valued order above all else. Poirot's mustache, meticulously waxed, twitched slightly as he turned the page of a novel, though his sharp gray eyes betrayed a mind restless for something more engaging than fiction. It was a dreary November evening in 1935. And the world outside seemed cloaked in a fog of secrets. Poirot's thoughts drifted to his recent cases, a string of petty thefts and domestic disputes that had failed to ignite the spark of his little gray cells. He longed for a puzzle worthy of his intellect, a labyrinth of motives and deceptions that would demand his full attention. As if summoned by this very thought, a sharp rap at the door broke the silence. Poirot set down his tisane and glanced at the clock. 7:30, an unusual hour for visitors. He rose, smoothing his waistcoat, and opened the door to reveal a rain-soaked messenger boy, no older than 16, clutching a damp envelope sealed with crimson wax. The boy's cap dripped onto the doormat, and he shivered as he extended the letter. "For you, sir," the boy stammered, his teeth chattering. "Urgent," they said. Poirot raised an eyebrow, accepting the envelope with a nod. "Mercy, young man. You have braved the storm admirably." I pressed a shilling into the boy's hand, eliciting a grateful grin, and closed the door as the lad scampered back into the downpour. The envelope bore no return address, only Poirot's name in elegant, looping script. The wax seal, imprinted with a stylized thorn, hinted at aristocracy. Poirot's fingers, precise as a surgeon's, broke the seal and extracted a single sheet of heavy cream paper. The letter was written in a feminine hand, its tone both commanding and cryptic. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a man of unparalleled deductive skill precedes you. I find myself in need of such a mind. You are cordially invited to Blackthorn Manor, my residence in the Yorkshire moors, for a weekend, gathering commencing this Friday. A matter of grave importance requires your presence, though I dare not commit its details to paper. A car will collect you at King's Cross Station at noon. Discretion is paramount. I trust you will not disappoint. Yours sincerely, Lady Eleanor." Blackthorn Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. A mystery cloaked in secrecy, delivered by a woman of evident wealth and influence. This was precisely the challenge he craved. The name Blackthorn stirred a vague memory, perhaps from a society column or a whispered tale of old money and older scandals. He folded the letter and placed it on his desk, already calculating the preparations needed for the journey. Yorkshire, moors, with their desolate beauty and whispered legends, promised an intriguing stage for whatever drama awaited. By Friday morning, the rain had given way to a crisp, misty chill. Poirot, dressed in a tailored overcoat and carrying a small valise, stood on the platform at King's Cross, his eyes scanning the bustling crowd. At precisely noon, a sleek black Rolls-Royce glided to a stop beside the curb. The driver, a wiry man with a face like weathered leather, stepped out and tipped his cap. "Monsieur Poirot." "For Blackthorn Manor," he said, his Yorkshire accent thick but polite. "Oui, that is I," Poirot replied, inclining his head. He settled into the car's plush interior, noting the faint scent of lavender and the monogrammed cushions bearing the same thorn emblem as the letter seal. The drive was long, winding through London's smoky outskirts and into the rolling countryside, where hedgerows gave way to vast, wind-swept moors. The landscape, shrouded in mist, seemed to guard its secrets as fiercely as Lady Eleanor's letter. As the car climbed a narrow road toward Blackthorn Manor, Poirot caught his first glimpse of the estate. The manor loomed against the gray sky, a sprawling Gothic edifice of weathered stone, its towers and turrets piercing the mist like the bones of some ancient beast. Ivy clung to its walls, and the windows glinted with an almost watchful intensity. The grounds were meticulously kept, yet there was an air of melancholy, as if the manor itself mourned some forgotten tragedy. The car halted before a grand oak door, and Poirot was greeted by a butler whose gaunt frame and sallow complexion suggested a man burdened by more than his duties. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," the butler said, his voice low and tremulous. "I am Grayson. Lady Eleanor awaits you in the drawing-room." "See, Monsieur Grayson," Poirot replied, noting the butler's nervous glance toward the shadowed interior. The entrance hall was a cavern of dark wood and flickering gaslight, adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow Poirot's every step. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with thorny vines that echoed the family's crest. Grayson led Poirot through a maze of corridors, each lined with tapestries and artifacts that whispered of wealth and history. The drawing-room was a study in opulence, velvet drapes, roaring fire, and a crystal chandelier that cast fractured light across the room. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn stood by the hearth, a tall woman in her late 50s, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald eyes, sharp as cut glass, assessed Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand, "your presence honors us. I trust the journey was not too taxing." "It was most agreeable," Lady Eleanor Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "Your invitation, it intrigues me. It's a matter of grave importance, you say?" Her lips tightened, and she gestured to a seat. "All in good time. First, allow me to introduce my guests. They will join us for dinner shortly. Siphon Q." The door opened, and the other guests entered, each a distinct character in what Poirot sensed was a carefully orchestrated drama. First was Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, a barrel-chested man with a bristling mustache and a military bearing that seemed almost too perfect. His handshake was firm, but his eyes darted nervously, as if expecting an ambush. Next came Vivienne Leroux, a glamorous actress whose auburn hair and crimson gown drew every eye. Her smile was dazzling, yet Poirot detected a calculated edge to her charm. Dr. Mortimer Hargrove, reclusive scholar with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers, followed, his gaze fixed on a leather-bound book he clutched like a talisman. Finally, Charles Blackthorn, Lady Eleanor's nephew, slouched in with the air of a man who resented his surroundings. His sullen expression and rumpled suits suggested a life of squandered privilege. "Dinner is served," Grayson announced, and the party moved to the dining room, a long hall dominated by a mahogany table set with silver and crystal. The meal was exquisite roast pheasant, truffled potatoes, and a claret that warmed the palate, but the conversation was stilted, punctuated by awkward silences. Poirot observed the dynamics, the colonel's attempts to steer the talk toward military history, Vivian's flirtatious banter with Charles, and Dr. Hargrove's muttered references to obscure manuscripts. Lady Eleanor presided with regal detachment, her eyes flicking to Poirot as if gauging his reactions. As dessert was served a delicate lemon soufflé, the tension in the room seemed to thicken. Poirot's mind catalogued every detail, the way Charles's fingers trembled around his wineglass, the colonel's habit of checking his pocket watch, Vivian's too loud laugh. He sensed a storm brewing, a collision of motives and secrets waiting to erupt. The storm broke with a scream. It came from upstairs. A raw, piercing cry that shattered the genteel atmosphere. The guests froze, forks clattering against plates. Grayson bolted from the room, followed by Lady Eleanor, her face pale but composed. Poirot, ever calm, set down his napkin and rose, his curiosity now a blazing fire. "Remain here, si vous plaît," he instructed the guests, though he knew they would not obey. He followed Grayson and Lady Eleanor up the grand staircase, the others trailing behind like moths to a flame. The scream had come from Lady Eleanor's private suite, a sumptuous chamber adorned with silk hangings and a four-poster bed. The door stood ajar, and inside a maid stood trembling, her hands pressed to her mouth. "The necklace," she gasped. "The sapphire necklace, it's gone." Lady Eleanor strode to a small safe embedded in the wall, its door slightly open. She spun the dial, her movements precise, despite her evident agitation, and peered inside. "It's true," she whispered. "The blackthorn sapphire, my family's heirloom, stolen." Poirot stepped forward, his eyes sweeping the room. The safe showed no signs of tampering, its lock intact. The windows were latched, the curtains undisturbed. The theft, he deduced, was no crude break-in, but a calculated act by someone with accessor, cunning, mangier. Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching. "A puzzle most intriguing. Lady Eleanor, you will permit Hercule Poirot to investigate?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. "I expected no less, Monsieur Poirot. That is why you are here." The guests, now crowded in the doorway, exchanged uneasy glances. Colonel Hawthorne muttered about damned thieves, while Vivian clutched her pearls, eyes wide with theatrical horror. Dr. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles, his face a mask of scholarly detachment, and Charles slunk back, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Poirot turned to the maid, a young woman named Clara, whose tear-streaked face suggested genuine distress. "Mademoiselle, when did you last see the necklace?" "This afternoon, sir," Clara replied, her voice quavering. "I helped Lady Eleanor dress for dinner, and she placed it in the safe herself. I swear it was there." "Can you, Monsieur Grayson?" Poirot asked, turning to the butler, who hovered near the door, his hands twisting nervously. I was in the kitchens, sir, overseeing the staff," Grayson stammered. "I know nothing of this." Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the butler's sweat-beaded brow. "Very well," he said. "We shall begin at once. No one leaves this manor until the truth is uncovered." Chapter 2. Shadows in the library. The air in Blackthorn Manor carried a weight that pressed against Hercule Poirot's temples, as though the very walls whispered secrets they dared not fully reveal. The dining room, where the evening's chaos had erupted with a scream, now lay silent. Its long mahogany table littered with half-empty wine-glasses and crumpled napkins. The guests had retired to their rooms, or so they claimed, but Poirot sensed the undercurrent of unease that pulsed through the manor like a hidden heartbeat. The theft of Lady Eleanor Blackthorn's sapphire necklace was no petty crime. It was, he suspected, the opening act of a far more intricate drama, Poirot stood in the grand hallway, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor as he adjusted his mustache with a thoughtful flick. The butler, Mr. Grayson, hovered nearby, his gaunt face pale under the flickering light of a chandelier. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, his voice smooth yet edged with authority. "You will show me to Lady Eleanor's room where this necklace was last seen. We begin at the heart of the matter, n'est-ce pas?" Grayson nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he led Poirot up a sweeping staircase adorned with portraits of stern-faced blackthorns, their eyes seeming to follow the detective's every step. The manor's opulence was undeniable: gilded frames, velvet drapes, and intricate woodwork, but it was marred by an oppressive stillness, as if the house itself held its breath. Lady Eleanor's bedroom was a study in elegance, with a four-poster bed draped in crimson silk and a rosewood vanity cluttered with crystal perfume bottles. The safe, embedded in the wall behind a painting of a stormy seascape, stood open, its contents plundered. Poirot knelt before it, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of the steel door. "No scratches, no signs of force," he murmured, his green eyes narrowing. The thief had a key, or the safe was left unlocked. Curious oversight for a woman as meticulous as Lady Eleanor. Grayson shifted uncomfortably. "Her ladyship is most particular about the safe, sir. She locks it herself every night." "Every night, you say?" Poirot's gaze flicked to the butler, sharp as a blade. "And yet, tonight, it was not so. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, who else has access to this room?" "Only the maids, sir, for cleaning, and myself, to attend to her ladyship's needs. But I assure you, our assurances are not evidence," Poirot interrupted, rising to his feet. "We shall see what the room itself tells us." He moved with deliberate precision, examining the window latches secure, the carpet undisturbed, and the vanity a faint smudge of powder on the mirror suggesting a hurried hand. The room offered no obvious clues, but Poirot's mind was already weaving a tapestry of possibilities. An inside job seemed certain, but the motive remained elusive. Leaving the bedroom, Poirot requested to be taken to the library, a room Grayson described as Lady Eleanor's sanctuary. "It is where her ladyship spends much of her time," the butler said, leading Poirot down a corridor lined with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes. "She is fond of history, particularly the history of this house." Okay, the library was a cavernous space, its walls lined with towering bookshelves that reached toward a vaulted ceiling painted with faded cherubs. A massive fireplace dominated one end, its embers casting a warm glow across leather-bound tomes, and a heavy oak table strewn with papers. The air smelled of old paper and wax, and Poirot inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of knowledge and secrets. "A fine room for contemplation," he remarked, his fingers brushing the spine of a book titled The Blackthorn Legacy. "And, perhaps, for concealment." He began his interviews with the guests, summoning them one by one to the library. First was Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, a man whose military bearing was as stiff as his starched collar. His gray mustache twitched as he sat, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "I don't see why I'm being questioned," he huffed. "I was at dinner when the scream was heard, same as everyone else." "And after dinner?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "You retired to your room?" "Oui." The colonel hesitated, his eyes darting to the fireplace. "I took a walk in the garden, needed some air, alone, in the dark, on a chilly Yorkshire evening." Poirot's smile was polite, but piercing. "Most curious. Ken, what did you see in the garden, Colonel?" "Nothing of note," Hawthorne replied, too quickly. "Just the roses. Lady Eleanor's pride and joy." Poirot made a mental note of the colonel's unease, his evasive glance suggesting more than a fondness for horticulture. he dismissed Hawthorne and called for Vivian Leroux, the actress whose entrance into the library was a performance in itself. She swept in, her emerald gown shimmering, her auburn hair cascading over one shoulder. "Monsieur Poirot," she purred, settling into a chair with theatrical grace. "This is all so dreadfully exciting, isn't it? Like a play, only with real stakes." "Exciting, perhaps, but also dangerous," Poirot said, his eyes fixed on her. "Where were you, Mademoiselle Leroux, when the necklace was stolen?" "I was in my room, practicing my lines," she said, waving a hand airily. "I'm preparing for a new role in London, a duchess, betrayed by her lover. Quite tragic." "And you heard nothing? No scream? No footsteps?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. Vivian's smile faltered, just for a moment. "Well, perhaps I heard the scream, but I thought it was the wind. This old house creaks and groans, you know." Poirot nodded, unconvinced. Her alibi was as flimsy as her gown, and her overly dramatic demeanor suggested she was playing a role even now. He let her go, his mind turning to the next guest, Dr. Mortimer Hargrove, a reclusive scholar whose stooped posture and wire-rimmed spectacles belied a keen intellect. Hargrove entered the library, clutching a worn notebook, his eyes darting nervously. "I hope this won't take long, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice dry as parchment. "I have research to attend to." "Your research, doctor? Is it connected to the Blackthorn family?" Poirot asked, gesturing to the book. In Hargrove's hands, the scholar stiffened. "In a manner of speaking, I study folklore, and the Blackthorns have a colorful history. God, the sapphire necklace, for instance, is said to be cursed. It was stolen from a French noblewoman during the Revolution, and every owner since has met with misfortune. A curse, you say?" Poirot's tone was skeptical, but his interest was piqued. "And what does this curse entail?" "Loss, betrayal, death," Hargrove said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The necklace is said to be the key to a hidden treasure, but those who seek it invite ruin." Poirot's little gray cells buzzed. Cursed necklace, a hidden treasure. This was no ordinary theft. He thanked Hargrove and turned his attention to the bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines. His hand paused on a volume of local history, slightly askew. Pulling it out, he discovered a hidden compartment behind it, containing a single torn page from a diary. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, dated a century ago. The sapphire must never leave the manor, lest the truth be uncovered. The vault awaits, but only the worthy may find it. Before Poirot could ponder the page's meaning, the library's lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp rose from the guests who had gathered in the hallway outside, drawn by the commotion of the interviews. Somewhere in the manor, a door slammed, and footsteps echoed, then faded. Poirot stood still, his senses sharp, listening to the rustle of fabric, the quickened breathing of those nearby. "Remain calm," he called, his voice steady. "Sir Grayson, the lights, if you please." After a tense minute, the lights sputtered back to life, revealing the guests' pale faces. Vivian clutched the colonel's arm, her eyes wide, while Hargrove stood apart, his notebook clutched to his chest. Charles, Lady Eleanor's nephew, lingered at the back, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his expression unreadable. Poirot returned to the library table, the torn diary page in his hand. "Mies Amos," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "The thief of the necklace is among us, and I, Hercule Poirot, have identified them. But the theft is but a thread in a larger tapestry, one woven with secrets and deceit. The game, it is only beginning." The guests stared, some with fear, others with defiance. Poirot's gaze swept over them, lingering on Charles, whose muddy shoes caught his agile detail he had overlooked in the chaos. The library, with its shadows and secrets, seemed to close in around them. and Poirot knew that the truth, like the manor itself, would not yield easily. As the guests dispersed, Poirot remained in the library, his mind racing. The torn page, the curse, the blackout, were pieces of a puzzle that extended beyond a stolen necklace. He opened the Blackthorn Legacy and began to read, the firelight casting long shadows across the room. The book detailed the manor's history, from its construction in the 17th century to its role as a smuggler's haven in the 1800s. One passage caught his eye, a reference to a hidden vault, sealed by a mechanism known only to the Blackthorn heirs. The sapphire necklace, it seemed, was more than a jewel, was a key. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak. He turned to see Lady Eleanor herself, standing in the doorway, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low but steady, "you are stirring what is best left undisturbed." Madame Poirot replied, rising with a slight bow. "The waters, they are already troubled, so the theft of your necklace is but the ripple on the surface. I seek the current beneath." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, turning to leave as silently as she had come. Poirot watched her go, his mind alight with questions. Why had she invited him here? What did she fear Roar know? The library, with its endless shelves and hidden compartments, seemed to mock him with its silence. But Poirot was undeterred. The truth, he knew, was waiting to be uncovered, and he would find it, one shadow at a time. Chapter 3. The alibi unravels. The morning after the blackout at Blackthorn Manor broke with an uneasy stillness, as though the very walls held their breath. The Yorkshire moors, cloaked in a heavy mist, seemed to press against the manor's tall windows, blurring the line between the outside world and the secrets festering within. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit and polished shoes, stood in the drawing room, his sharp eyes scanning the gathered guests. The air was thick with suspicion. The weight of the previous night's revelations. Mr. Grayson, the butler, unmasked as the thief of Lady Eleanor's sapphire necklace, hanging over them like a storm cloud. Poirot's voice, crisp and measured, cut through the tension. "Ms. Amos, the confession of Monsieur Grayson has illuminated one truth. The theft of the necklace was no solitary act. There is, I suspect, a web of deception here, and we shall untangle it thread by thread." His mustache twitched slightly, a telltale sign of his mind at work, those little gray cells already piecing together fragments of the puzzle. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, his face ruddy from years of military campaigns, or so he claimed, clutched a glass of brandy with a grip that betrayed his nerves. Vivienne Leroux, the glamorous actress whose auburn curls cascaded over her emerald green dress, toyed with a pearl earring, her eyes darting to the others as if measuring their guilt. Dr. Percival Hargrove, the reclusive scholar, sat hunched over a notebook, his pen scratching furiously. Though whether he was taking notes or merely pretending to do so, Poirot could not yet discern. And Charles Blackthorn, Lady Eleanor's estranged nephew, slouched in an armchair, his boyish features marred by a scowl that suggested both defiance and fear. Lady Eleanor herself stood by the fireplace, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun, her posture regal despite the scandal unfolding in her home. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency, "you must understand that this theft is a personal affront. That necklace is not merely a jewel, it is a Blackthorn heirloom, a symbol of our family's honor. I trust you will root out every conspirator involved." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Madame, rest assured, Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is laid bare. First, we must examine the confession of Monsieur Grayson more closely. He claims an accomplice, Nest CEPA. Let us hear his words again." The butler, Mr. Grayson, was brought into the room. His hands cuffed by the local constable who had arrived at dawn to assist Poirot. Grayson's usual polish was gone. His gray hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. "I've told you everything, sir," he said, his voice trembling. "I took the necklace from the safe, using my master key. I had no choice. My debts were crushing me. The man who hired me, he didn't give his name. He said he'd pay me enough to clear my slate if I handed the necklace over. I left it in the hollow of the old oak by the stables, as he instructed." "And this mysterious man," Poirot pressed, his tone deceptively mild. "You met him? Where? When?" Grayson swallowed hard. "2 weeks ago, in the village pub. He was cloaked, his face half hidden. Said he knew about my debts, offered me a way out. I never saw him again after that." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Convenient story, Monsieur Grayson. A faceless man, a clandestine meeting. You expect us to believe you acted alone in the theft itself. Nan, I think not. There is more. Here, and we shall find it." The guests exchanged glances, each silently accusing the other. Poirot paced slowly before them, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us turn to the alibis," he said. "Each of you claims to have been elsewhere during the theft, yet the manor is not so large that one could move unnoticed. Monsieur Charles, you said you were in the garden. Oui." Charles straightened, his jaw tightening. "That's right. I needed air after dinner. The atmosphere in this house is stifling, what with all the family drama." He cast a pointed look at Lady Eleanor, who stiffened but said nothing. Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on Charles's shoes. "Curious, then, that your shoes bear traces of mud, not the coarse, red mud of the garden paths, but the fine gray silt found near the library's window latch. Perhaps you were not in the garden at all, Monsieur Charles. Perhaps you were closer to the scene of the crime." Charles's face flushed. "That's absurd. I might have walked near the library earlier in the day. The grounds are muddy everywhere after last week's rain." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone neutral but his eyes gleaming. "But let us explore further. Mademoiselle Leroux, you claim you were in your room preparing for bed. Yet the maid reports hearing voices in the corridor near your room at the time of the theft. Voices, plural. With whom were you speaking?" Vivienne's laugh was light, almost musical, but it carried an edge. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, you make it sound so sinister. So I was practicing lines for my next role. I often read aloud to myself. Helps me memorize." "Dedicated artist," Poirot said, his smile polite but unconvinced. "And you, Colonel Hawthorne, you claim you were in the billiards room alone. Yet the billiards table shows no signs of use and no chalk marks, no displaced balls. A strange oversight for a man who claims to have spent an hour there." The colonel's mustache bristled. "I was inspecting the cues, thinking of a game, but decided against it." "A man can change his mind, Poirot." "Indeed he can," Poirot replied, "but a man's boots do not lie. Yours, Colonel, are polished to a mirror shine, yet there is a faint smudge of ash near the heel-ash that matches the fireplace in the library, where a certain torn diary page was found. Curious, Nan." The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's observations settling over the guests like a shroud. Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. "If I may, Monsieur Poirot, this speculation is all well and good. But what of the necklace itself? Keeson says it's gone, handed off to this mysterious accomplice. Surely our focus should be on recovering it, not casting aspersions." Poirot turned to Hargrove, his expression unreadable. "The necklace, Monsieur Hargrove, is but a piece of the puzzle. Its theft is a symptom, not the disease. It's a true question. Is why this necklace? Why now? And who stands to gain? You spoke last night of the Blackthorn family legend, the curse tied to the sapphire. Perhaps you know more than you have shared." Hargrove's pen stilled, his eyes flickering with unease. I am a scholar, not a conspirator. My interest is academic. The Blackthorn sapphire is said to have been smuggled from India centuries ago, tied to a blood feud that cost lives. That's all I know. Poirot nodded, but his silence suggested he was far from satisfied. He turned to Lady Eleanor. You have been gracious in allowing Hercule Poirot to probe your guests, but I must ask why invite such a diverse group to your manor. Colonel, an actress, a scholar, your nephew, each seems to carry a piece of the Blackthorn legacy, whether by blood or by ambition. Was this gathering truly a social affair, or did you anticipate trouble? Lady Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. I invited them because they are connected to my family in one way or another. I wished to mend old wounds, to bring us together. The theft was unexpected. Unexpected, perhaps, Poirot said, but not without purpose. I believe the necklace was taken to provoke, to stir the waters and reveal what lies beneath. And now, Mies, Amos, the waters are indeed stirred. As the morning wore on, Poirot excused the guests, asking them to remain within the manor's grounds. He retreated to the library, where the torn diary page still lay on a table, its jagged edges a silent challenge. The page, written in a spidery hand, spoke of a debt repaid in sapphire and mentioned a meeting at the Rose Gate. Poirot's fingers traced the words, his mind racing. The Rose Gate, likely a reference to the manor's rose garden, a secluded spot near the chapel. But a debt, to whom, and for what? He was interrupted by a soft knock. Vivian Leroux stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of defiance and nervousness. Monsieur Poirot, might I have a word? Alone. Frank Poirot gestured to a chair. Of course, mademoiselle, speak freely. Vivian sat, smoothing her dress with a practiced grace that did little to mask her unease. I know what you're thinking, that I'm involved in this mess. I'm not. But I'll tell you something, because I don't trust the others. Charles and I, we were close, years ago, before he fell out with Lady Eleanor. He came to me last month, begging for help. Said he was in trouble. Something about family secrets and a debt he couldn't pay. I thought he was being dramatic, but now, I'm not so sure. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. A debt, you say? To whom? Vivian hesitated, her fingers twisting the pearl earring. He wouldn't say, but he was scared, Monsieur Poirot. I've never seen him like that. And last night, when the lights went out, I saw him slip out of the dining room toward the library. I didn't follow. I was too frightened. Frightened of what, mademoiselle? Oh, this place, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's like the walls are watching. There's something wrong here. I can't explain it. Poirot studied her, noting the genuine fear in her eyes. Merci, mademoiselle. Candor is appreciated. But tell me, why come to me now? Why not last night? Vivian's gaze faltered. Because this morning I found this. She reached into her pocket and produced a small, folded note. Poirot took it, unfolding it carefully. In a hurried scrawl, it read, "Leave Blackthorn Manor, or the truth will bury you." Poirot's mustache twitched. This was delivered to you? When? Slipped under my door at dawn, Vivian said. I don't know who wrote it, but it's why I'm telling you about Charles. I think he's in deeper than he's letting on. Poirot pocketed the note, his mind already turning over this new piece of evidence. Return to your room, mademoiselle, and speak of this to no one. Hercule Poirot will handle the rest. As Vivian left, Poirot's attention returned to the diary page. The mention of the Rose Gate nagged at him. He decided to inspect the garden himself, but first he sought out Charles. The young man was in the conservatory, pacing like a caged animal. His shirt was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Monsieur Charles, Poirot said, his tone calm but firm. We must speak of your alibi. The mud on your shoes suggests you were not in the garden as you claim. And now Mademoiselle Leroux tells me of a debt, of your fear. What is it you are hiding? Charles's face paled, but he squared his shoulders. I don't owe you an explanation, Poirot. You're not the police. None. I am not, Poirot agreed, but I am a man who seeks the truth. And the truth, monsieur, is that you are entangled in something dangerous. The note left for Mademoiselle Leroux. You know of it? Charles's eyes widened. What note? Poirot described it, watching Charles closely. The young man's reaction seemed genuine, but Poirot had seen many a convincing performance. If you wish to protect yourself, you will tell me what you know now. Charles ran a hand through his hair, his defiance crumbling. All right, fine. I was near the library last night, but not for the reasons you think. I was meeting someone, not the accomplice Grayson mentioned. I swear, it was a private matter. Someone from the village, someone I owe money to. They said they'd come to the manor to collect, but they never showed. And this person, Poirot, said they have a name. Charles hesitated, then muttered, Rourke. Tom Rourke. He's a local, runs with some rough types. But I didn't see him last night. I swear. Poirot nodded, filing the name away. Merci, monsieur. For now, remain where I can find you. The rose garden was next. Tucked behind the chapel, it was a riot of color, the roses blooming in defiant contrast to the manor's gloom. Poirot walked the paths, his eyes scanning for anything unusual. Near a stone bench, he noticed a patch of disturbed earth, as if someone had been digging. Kneeling, he brushed away the soil, revealing a small metal box, rusted but intact. Inside was a single key, its surface etched with a rose motif. Poirot's pulse quickened. The key, he suspected, was linked to the rose gate mentioned in the diary. But before he could ponder further, a shadow fell across him. He looked up to see Colonel Hawthorne, his face grim. Found something, Poirot? The colonel asked, his voice gruff. Perhaps, Poirot replied, slipping the key into his pocket. And you, Colonel? What brings you to the rose garden? The colonel's eyes narrowed. Fresh air. This place is suffocating. But you're stirring up trouble, poking into things that don't concern you. Poirot smiled faintly. Trouble, Colonel, is my profession, and I suspect it concerns us all. As the colonel stalked off, Poirot returned to the manor, the key burning a hole in his pocket. A day passed in a blur of interviews and observations, each guest revealing a little more of their secrets. Dr. Hargrove admitted to researching the Blackthorne family for years, driven by a fascination with their smuggling history. Lady Eleanor spoke of her hope to reconcile with Charles, though she admitted their estrangement stemmed from his reckless spending. And Vivian, in a second conversation, hinted at a falling out with Charles over a failed business venture, though she refused to elaborate. By evening, the manor buzzed with tension. Dinner was a strained affair, the guests barely touching their food. Poirot, ever observant, noticed Vivian and Charles avoiding each other's gaze, while the colonel's hand trembled as he reached for his wine. Dr. Hargrove, meanwhile, excused himself early, claiming a headache as the clock struck 10. Poirot retired to his room, only to find another note slipped under his door. This one was in a different hand, more deliberate. The rose gate opens at midnight. Beware the shadow. Poirot's heart raced. The rose gate, perhaps a literal gate, perhaps a metaphor, but midnight was mere hours away. He spent the next hour preparing, his mind racing through the clues. Grayson's confession, Charles's debt, Vivian's fear, the colonel's ash-smudged boots, Hargrove's obsession, and Lady Eleanor's guarded demeanor. The key in his pocket felt heavier with each passing minute. At 11:30, Poirot slipped out of his room, moving silently through the manor's darkened corridors. The rose garden was his destination, but he took a detour through the library, where he retrieved the torn diary page. Its words seemed to pulse with new meaning. A debt repaid in sapphire. The rose gate awaits. The garden was bathed in moonlight when he arrived, the roses glowing like specters. He found the stone bench again, and beside it, a low iron gate, half hidden by vines. The rose gate, he realized. The key fit perfectly, the lock clicking open with a soft groan. Beyond the gate was a narrow path leading to the chapel's side entrance. Poirot hesitated, his instincts screaming of danger. But he pressed on, entering the chapel. The air was cold, the silence oppressive. A faint light flickered behind the altar, and as he approached, he saw a figure cloaked, just as Grayson had described. "Who is there?" Poirot called, his voice steady, despite the tension coiling in his chest. The figure turned. But before they could speak, a deafening crash echoed through the chapel. A chandelier, loosened from its moorings, plummeted toward Poirot. He dove aside, the crystal shattering inches from where he stood. The figure vanished into the shadows, leaving Poirot breathless but unharmed. As he rose, brushing dust from his coat, Poirot's mind raced. The note, the key, the rose gate, the attack hall were connected, part of a larger design. The chapter closed with him standing in the shattered chapel, his resolve unbroken. "Hercule Poirot does not falter," he murmured, clutching the key. "The truth is close, and I shall find it." Chapter 4. The ghost of Blackthorn, past the morning mist, clung to the Yorkshire moors like a shroud, curling around Blackthorn Manor's ancient stone walls and seeping into the crevices of its secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hallway, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp eyes tracing the intricate patterns of the chandelier above. The coded note from the previous night lay folded in his pocket, its cryptic message: "Seek the eyes that watch the past," burning in his mind like a riddle waiting to be unraveled. The theft of Lady Eleanor's sapphire necklace was no mere crime of greed, he was certain. It was a key to a deeper mystery, one rooted in the manor's shadowed history. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as he made his way to the gallery. It's a long, dimly lit corridor, lined with portraits of the Blackthorn lineage. The air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and wax, and the silence was broken only by the distant creak of the manor settling into its bones. He paused before a towering oil painting of Lord Reginald Blackthorn, Lady Eleanor's great-grandfather, a man whose stern features and piercing gaze seemed to follow Poirot's every step. The note's words echoed in his mind. The eyes that watched the past. Could this be the clue he sought? "Qui, mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, stroking his mustache. It is never truly gone, is it? It lingers, like a guest who refuses to depart. He leaned closer, inspecting the portrait. Lord Reginald's eyes, painted with uncanny realism, seemed to gleam with a secret. Poirot's gaze drifted to the ornate frame, its carved roses and vines worn by time. His fingers brushed the edge, searching for anything amiss. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and a small panel in the frame swung open, revealing a folded parchment tucked within. His heart quickened as he extracted it, the paper brittle and yellowed, bearing the faint scent of ink and dust. The parchment was a letter written in a spidery hand, dated 1832. It read, "To my heirs, beware of the treasure you seek, the sapphires, but the key, not the prize. The true wealth lies beneath, guarded by the weight of our sins. Trust not the walls, for they listen, and seek not the vault without the map." R.B. Poirot's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "C'est magnifique," he said softly. The sapphire necklace, It is not the end, but the beginning. A key, you say, Lord Reginald. Then Poirot shall find the lock. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor. Dr. Hargrove, the reclusive scholar, appeared, his wiry frame hunched slightly as he clutched a leather-bound book. His spectacles glinted in the dim light, and his expression was one of nervous curiosity. Monsieur Poirot, Hargrove said, his voice trembling slightly. I thought I might find you here. You've taken an interest in the Blackthorn family history, haven't you? Poirot inclined his head, his eyes never leaving Hargrove's. The history, it is most illuminating, Doctor. Tell me, what do you know of Lord Reginald Blackthorn and his treasures? Hargrove hesitated, his fingers tightening around the book. Lord Reginald was a notorious figure in his time, he began, his tone measured. A smuggler, say, who amassed a fortune through illicit trade along the Yorkshire coast. The locals still whisper of a treasure hidden within the manor hoard of gold and jewels, guarded by a curse. The sapphire necklace, I believe, is tied to that legend. Some say it was crafted to unlock the vault where the treasure lies. Eyes gleamed. A curse, you say? And what does this curse entail, mon ami? Hargrove shifted uncomfortably. It said that anyone who seeks the treasure without the rightful claim will meet a grim fate, betrayal, madness, or death. The Blackthorn family has seen its share of tragedies since Reginald's time. Lady Eleanor's father, for instance, died in a mysterious fire in the East Wing. Some believe it was no accident. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. And you, Doctor, do you believe in such curses? Hargrove's lips twitched into a faint smile. I am a man of reason, Monsieur Poirot, but history has a way of weaving its own spells. The necklace's theft. It feels like a spark that could ignite something far larger. Precisement, Poirot said, his tone sharp, and it is Poirot's task to ensure that spark does not become a conflagration. Tell me, Doctor, have you explored the manor's cellars? The letter suggests a vault lies beneath. Hargrove's eyes widened briefly before he regained his composure. The cellars. They're a labyrinth, Monsieur Poirot. I've studied the manor's blueprints, but they're incomplete. If there's a vault, it's well hidden. Poirot smiled thinly. Then we shall explore together, Nan. The past, it seems, demands our attention. The cellars of Blackthorn Manor were a stark contrast to its opulent upper floors. The air was damp and cold, the stone walls slick with moisture and draped in cobwebs. Poirot, accompanied by Hargrove, and the butler, Mr. Grayson, descended a narrow staircase, a single lantern casting flickering shadows across the uneven steps. Grayson, still shaken from his confession to stealing the necklace, carried the lantern with trembling hands, his eyes darting nervously into the darkness. Careful, Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. The light, it is our guide, and we must not lose it. Grayson nodded, his face pale. I've only been down here to fetch wine, sir. Never beyond the storage rooms. This place, it gives me the chills. Hargrove, clutching his book as if it were a talisman, gestured toward a rusted iron gate at the end of the corridor. Beyond that gate, the cellars extend into older tunnels. Some say they were used by smugglers to hide their goods. Poirot examined the gate, its hinges groaning as he pushed it open. The air grew colder, carrying the faint tink of salt, as if the sea itself lingered in the stone. The trio moved deeper, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence of Poirot's. Sharp eyes scanned the walls, noting faint carvings, serrals, crosses, and cryptic symbols etched into the stone. Regardless, Poirot said, pointing to a carving of a rose entwined with a serpent. A symbol of the Blackthorn family, perhaps, or a warning. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles, leaning closer. Sold, likely from Reginald's time. The rose is a recurring motif in the family's heraldry, but the serpent, that's unusual. It could signify danger or secrecy. Poirot's fingers traced the carving, his mind racing. The letter had mentioned a map, and the symbols suggested a trail. He moved forward, his cane tapping the floor, until he reached a dead-end blank stone wall. But Poirot's instincts told him otherwise. He pressed his hands against the stone, searching for a seam. A faint click echoed, and a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his eyes gleaming with triumph. The manor, it hides its secrets well, but not from Hercule Poirot. The passage was cramped, its ceiling low, and its walls damp. Poirot led the way, his small frame navigating the tight space with surprising agility. Grayson held the lantern high, casting light on more carvings, numbers, letters, and fragments of what appeared to be a riddle. Beneath the rose, where shadows sleep. The key unlocks what secrets keep. 3 turns left, then right, then straight. The vault awaits, but beware. Your fate. Poirot read the words aloud, his voice steady. A riddle, Mies Amos. The sapphire necklace, it is the key, but the vault, it is near. Hargrove's voice trembled with excitement. This must lead to the treasure, Monsieur Poirot. But the warning, beware your fate. It's chilling, arose. Lips twitched. The fate, it is only for those who lack the order and method. Come, let us proceed. The passage twisted and turned, the air growing heavier with each step. At last, they reached a circular chamber, its walls adorned with faded murals depicting ships, stormy seas, and a figure in a black cloak, Lord Reginald, perhaps overseeing his smuggling empire. In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, its surface engraved with a slot shaped like a star. "The sapphire," Poirot said, his voice low. "It fits here, I am certain. But where's the necklace now?" Before anyone could answer, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground trembled, and with a deafening groan, a trapdoor beneath Poirot's feet sprang open. He leaped back just in time, but Grayson was not so fortunate. The butler stumbled, the lantern falling from his hands and shattering on the stone floor, plunging them into darkness. "Stay calm," Poirot commanded, his voice cutting through the panic. "Monsieur Grayson, are you injured?" A groan came from below. I'm alive, sir," Grayson called, his voice echoing from the pit. "Not deep, but I can't climb out." Hargrove fumbled in the darkness, his breathing rapid. "This is the curse," he whispered. "We've gone too far." Poirot's voice was sharp. "There is no curse, doctor. Only the cleverness of men who wish to protect their secrets. Stay where you are." Using his keen sense of touch, Poirot navigated to the pedestal, his fingers brushing the cold stone. He recalled the riddle. 3 turns left, then right, then straight. Perhaps it referred not to directions, but to a mechanism. He pressed a slot and twisted. First left 3 times, then right once. A faint click sounded, and a sliver of light appeared as a hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase leading upward. "Voila," Poirot said, his tone triumphant. "The manor, it yields its secrets to those who think." With Hargrove's help, they fashioned a makeshift rope from Grayson's coat and pulled the butler from the pit. Grayson, shaken but unharmed, clutched Poirot's arm. "Thank you, sir. I thought I was done for." Poirot patted his shoulder. "The trap, it was meant to deter, not to kill. Someone wishes to frighten us, but Poirot, he is not so easily deterred." The staircase led to a small chamber above the cellar, its walls lined with dusty shelves. On one shelf, half hidden behind a cobwebbed bottle, Poirot found a locket, its silver surface tarnished but intact. Inside was a miniature map, drawn in faded ink, depicting the manor's grounds with a single mark across beneath a rose garden near the chapel. C'est ça, Poirot said, holding the map to the faint light. The vault, it is beneath the roses. The necklace unlocks it, but the treasure, it is more than gold, I think. Hargrove peered at the map, his eyes wide. The chapel is on the other side of the manor. If the vault is there, why all this secrecy in the cellars? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Because, Doctor, the blackthorns were clever. They hid the path in plain sight, but only for those who know where to look. The cellars, they are a tested labyrinth to weed out the unworthy. As they emerged from the passage, the manor's clock struck noon, its chimes reverberating through the stone. Poirot tucked the locket into his pocket, his mind already racing ahead. The sapphire necklace was still missing, and the trap suggested someone was watching, someone who knew the manor's secrets as well as he did. Was it Charles, the estranged nephew, with his muddy shoes and shaky alibi? Vivian, the actress, with her calculated charm? Or perhaps Lady Eleanor herself, orchestrating a game to protect her family's legacy? The rest of the day passed in a blur of interviews and observations. Poirot returned to the gallery, questioning the other guests, with his characteristic blend of courtesy and cunning. Charles, lounging in the drawing room with a glass of brandy, claimed ignorance of the manor's history, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the portrait of Lord Reginald. Vivian, draped in a silk shawl, spun a tale of her innocence, her voice trembling with theatrical sincerity. The colonel, polishing his spectacles with a handkerchief, spoke of military campaigns, but grew silent when pressed about his connection to the Blackthorns. Lady Eleanor, ever the gracious hostess, invited Poirot to join her for tea in the conservatory. The glass walls offered a view of the moors, their bleak beauty a stark contrast to the tension within the manor. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she poured the tea, her emerald eyes meeting Poirot's with a mixture of defiance and fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "you've been poking about in places best left undisturbed. The necklace is a family heirloom, nothing more. Why stir up old ghosts?" Poirot sipped his tea, his expression unreadable. "Madame, the ghosts, they are already awake. The theft of your necklace, it is a thread in a tapestry of secrets. The locket, the map, the vault, these are not mere relics. They point to something. You wish to keep hidden, Anne?" Eleanor's lips tightened. "You're a clever man, Monsieur Poirot, but some truths are better left buried." Poirot set down his cup, his eyes piercing. "The truth, madame, it is like a rose. Beautiful, but with thorns that draw blood. Poirot, he does not fear the thorns." As he left the conservatory, the locket heavy in his pocket, Poirot felt the weight of the manor's secrets pressing against him. The trap in the cellar had been a warning, but it only sharpened his resolve. The rose garden awaited, and with it, the vault that held the key to Blackthorn Manors, past its present dangers. Chapter 5. A Dance of Motives. The grand ballroom of Blackthorn Manor shimmered under the glow of a dozen crystal chandeliers, their prisms scattering light across the polished mahogany floors. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and wax, mingling with the faint musk of old money and older secrets. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, ever the poised hostess, had insisted on hosting an evening ball despite the theft of her sapphire necklace and the undercurrent of suspicion that now pulsed through her isolated Yorkshire estate. It was a bold move, one that Hercule Poirot found both admirable and suspicious, for it suggested a desire to maintain appearances or, perhaps, to distract from something darker. Poirot stood at the edge of the ballroom, small, fastidious, figure dwarfed by the towering portraits of Blackthorn ancestors that lined the walls. His mustache twitched as he observed the guests, each moving through the waltz with a grace that belied their tangled motives. The retired Colonel, Reginald Hawthorne, his posture rigid as if still on parade, spun Lady Eleanor with a precision that spoke of military discipline, though his eyes darted nervously toward the shadowed corners of the room. Vivienne Leroux, the glamorous actress, glided across the floor with Dr. Simon Hargrove, her laughter a touch too bright, her hand lingering on his arm a fraction too long. Charles Blackthorne, Lady Eleanor's estranged nephew, stood apart, nursing a glass of brandy and watching the dancers with a brooding intensity that made Poirot's little gray cells hum with interest. The orchestra played a lilting Viennese waltz, its notes weaving through the chatter and clink of champagne flutes. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, his sharp eyes cataloging every gesture, every glance. He had decoded the miniature map found in the locket from the hidden passage, a delicate, faded sketch that pointed to a vault beneath the manor's chapel. The discovery had sharpened his focus, for it suggested that the theft of the sapphire necklace was not an end in itself, but a means to uncover something far more valuable, the fabled Blackthorn treasure. Yet, as the music swelled, Poirot sensed that the evening's carefully choreographed dance was about to unravel into chaos. Monsieur Poirot, came a soft voice at his elbow. He turned to find Lady Eleanor, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light, her emerald gown accentuating the pallor of her face. "You seem more observer than participant tonight. Will you not join the dance?" Poirot offered a polite smile, his eyes never leaving hers. Madame Hercule Poirot finds the dance of human motives far more compelling than the waltz. And tonight, I sense many such dances are afoot, Lady. Eleanor's lips tightened, but she maintained her composure. "You are a curious man, monsieur. I trust you are making progress with your investigation." "Progress, oui, but the truth, it is like a fine wine, it requires time to breathe." He paused, noting the faint tremor in her hand as she adjusted her shawl. "Tell me, madame, why this ball, with the theft unresolved and your guests uneasy? It is a bold choice." Her eyes flickered, but she answered smoothly, "Tradition, monsieur. The Blackthorne family has hosted a ball on this date for generations. To cancel would be to admit weakness, and I will not give my enemies that satisfaction." Enemies. Poirot's tone was light, but his gaze was piercing. An interesting choice of word. Lady Eleanor laughed, a sound as brittle as the chandelier glass. "A figure of speech, nothing more. Enjoy the evening, monsieur." She glided away, leaving Poirot to ponder the weight of her words. He turned his attention back to the dancers. Colonel Hawthorne had relinquished Lady Eleanor to another partner and now stood near the refreshment table, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm against his glass. Poirot noted the faint sheen of sweat on his brow, unusual for a man who prided himself on his composure. Across the room, Vivienne's flirtations with Dr. Hargrove had grown bolder. She leaned close, whispering something that made the scholar's face flush. Charles, meanwhile, had moved to the terrace doors, his silhouette framed against the moonlit moors beyond. Poirot's instincts prickled each guest was playing a role, but whose script were they following? He slipped through the crowd, his movements unobtrusive, and approached the refreshment table. A silver tray held flutes of champagne, their bubbles catching the light like tiny stars. Poirot selected a glass, his fingers brushing the stem as he scanned the room. The miniature map had indicated a vault beneath the chapel, accessible via a spiral staircase hidden behind a false panel. He had intended to investigate during the ball, using the distraction of the music and merriment. But first, he needed to test the waters. "Colonel Hawthorne," Poirot said, approaching the older man with a genial nod. "You dance with the precision of a soldier. Tell me, does your military training also lend itself to solving mysteries?" Hawthorne's mustache bristled, and he set his glass down with a clink. "Mysteries? I leave that to detectives like you, Poirot. I'm a man of action, not riddles. Yet action requires motive. Does it not? Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. You were in the library during the blackout last night, Nan. A curious place to be when the lights fail. Hawthorne's jaw tightened. I was looking for a book, nothing more. A book, or perhaps a clue. Poirot tilted his head, watching the Colonel's reaction. The library holds many secrets, I find, as does this manor. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a ripple of laughter drew Poirot's attention. Vivian was now dancing with a young viscount, her movements fluid and theatrical, drawing every eye in the room. Dr. Hargrove stood alone, his expression a mix of longing and frustration. Poirot made a mental note. Vivian's charm was a weapon, wielded with precision, but against whom? He excused himself from the Colonel and moved toward the terrace where Charles still lingered. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of heather and damp earth from the moors. Charles turned at Poirot's approach, his face a mask of barely concealed agitation. Monsieur Blackthorne, Poirot said, his voice low, you seem ill at ease. Is it the theft that troubles you, or something more, personal? Charles's grip on his brandy glass tightened. I don't know what you're implying, Poirot. I'm here because my aunt insisted, nothing more. Yet your shoes, they tell a different story, Poirot said, gesturing to the faint traces of mud on Charles's polished boots. Mud from the library window ledge. Perhaps you were not in the garden during the theft, I think. Charles's eyes flashed, but he recovered quickly. You're grasping at straws, Poirot. I was in the garden, as I said. The mud could be from anywhere, could it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The truth, monsieur, is like a footprint. It leaves its mark, no matter how one tries to conceal it. Before Charles could retort, a commotion erupted in the ballroom. Poirot turned to see Vivian stagger, her hand clutching her throat as her champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. The music faltered, and the guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and fear. Vivian's eyes widened, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she sank to her knees. Poison. Someone cried, and the room descended into chaos. Poirot moved swiftly, his small frame cutting through the crowd with surprising agility. He knelt beside Vivian, his fingers probing her wrist for a pulse. Her skin was clammy, her pupils dilated, but she was still conscious. Her gaze locking onto his with a desperate plea. Calm yourself, mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice steady. Hercule Poirot will not let you perish. Turn to the nearest guest, a wide-eyed maid. Quickly, fetch milk and water now. As the maid hurried away, Poirot's mind raced. Symptoms, rapid breathing, dilated pupils, and the faint almond-like scent on her breath pointed to cyanide, a poison both swift and deadly. But cyanide required proximity, intent. Someone had tampered with her champagne, and Poirot suspected the intended target was not Vivian but himself. He had been holding a flute moments earlier, and only a chance decision to set it down had spared him. The maid returned with a jug of milk and a glass of water. Poirot poured the milk into Vivian's mouth, urging her to swallow. Drink, mademoiselle. It will dilute the poison. He followed with water, keeping her head steady as she coughed and spluttered. The crowd pressed closer, their murmurs, a mix of concern and suspicion, but Poirot ignored them. His focus absolute. Dr. Hargrove pushed through, his scholarly demeanor replaced by urgency. Let me help, Poirot. I've studied toxicology, Nan, Monsieur Poirot said sharply, waving him back. You will observe, not interfere. The situation is under control. Vivian's breathing steadied, her color returning slightly. Poirot leaned close, his voice low. Mademoiselle, who gave you the champagne? Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then, faintly, she whispered, Charles, ... He handed it to me. Poirot's eyes flicked to the terrace, where Charles had been standing moments before. The young man was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Poirot rose, his expression grim. "Stay with her," he instructed Dr. Hargrove. "Do not let her out of your sight." He slipped through the terrace doors, his steps silent on the stone pathway. The moon cast long shadows across the manicured gardens, and Poirot's keen eyes scanned for any sign of Charles. A faint rustle drew his attention to the rose garden, where a figure moved swiftly, cloaked in darkness. Poirot followed, his heart pounding not with fear, but with the thrill of the chase. The rose garden was a maze of thorny hedges, their blooms ghostly in the moonlight. Poirot paused, listening. A twig snapped to his left, and he turned, catching a glimpse of Charles's coat as he darted behind a trellis. Poirot moved with surprising speed, his small frame navigating the narrow paths with ease. "Monsieur Blackthorne," he called, his voice sharp, "you cannot outrun the truth. Come forward, and let us speak as men." Charles froze, his back to Poirot. Slowly, he turned, his face pale but defiant. "You're wrong about me, Poirot. I didn't poison her. Why do you flee?" Poirot stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Charles's. "And why did Mademoiselle Leroux name you as the one who gave her the champagne?" Charles's shoulders slumped, but his voice was steady. "I gave her the glass, yes, but I didn't. No, it was poisoned. Someone handed it to me, said it was for Vivian. I was just ... passing it along. Someone." Poirot's tone was skeptical. "A convenient story, monsieur. And who was this mysterious benefactor?" Charles hesitated, his eyes darting to the manor. "I didn't see their face. It was dark near the refreshment table. They wore a cloak, gloves, ... I thought it was one of the servants." Poirot's mustache twitched. A cloaked figure in a room full of guests. It was possible, but unlikely. You expect Hercule Poirot to believe such a tale? "Non, monsieur. You are entangled in this web, and I will unravel it." Before Charles could respond, a scream pierced the night not from the ballroom, but from the direction of the chapel. Poirot's head snapped toward the sound, his instincts flaring. "Stay here," he ordered Charles, though he doubted the young man would obey. He hurried toward the chapel, its Gothic spire looming against the starry sky. The chapel doors were ajar, a faint light spilling from within. Poirot stepped inside, his senses alert. The air was cool, scented with old wood and wax. Single candle burned on the altar, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. At the base of the altar lay the colonel, his face ashen, a trickle of blood seeping from a gash on his temple. Poirot knelt, checking for a pulse. The colonel was alive, but unconscious, his breathing shallow. A heavy candlestick lay beside him, its base stained with blood. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This was no accident. Someone had struck the colonel, and recently, for the blood was still wet. Footsteps echoed behind him, and Poirot turned to see Dr. Hargrove, his face flushed with exertion. "I heard the scream," Hargrove said, his voice trembling. "He, alive, but in need of care," Poirot said, rising. "You will fetch help, monsieur. But first, tell me, where were you when the scream sounded?" Hargrove blinked, caught off guard. "I was with Vivian, as you asked. I left her with the maid, and came running when I heard the noise." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "Go, then, bring the butler and any able-bodied men. We must move the colonel to safety." So Hargrove hurried away. Poirot examined the candlestick. Its weight and craftsmanship suggested it was part of the chapel's decor, not a weapon brought from outside. The attack had been impulsive, opportunistic. But why the colonel, and why now? He turned his attention to the altar, recalling the miniature map. The vault lay beneath, accessible via a hidden staircase. Poirot ran his fingers along the altar's edge, searching for a catch or seam. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and a panel slid open, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated, aware of the danger. The poison, the attack on the colonel. Someone was desperate to keep the vault's secrets hidden, yet his curiosity, his need for order, drove him forward. He lit a second candle from the altar and descended. The stone steps cold beneath his polished shoes. The staircase spiraled tightly, its walls damp and mossy. At the bottom, Poirot found a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient stone. In the center stood a vault door, its iron surface etched with intricate runes. The map had indicated a key, but Poirot had found none. He examined the door, noting a small keyhole in a series of engraved symbols, letters, perhaps, or a code. His candle flickered, casting long shadows. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues: the sapphire necklace, the smuggler's treasure, the coded note. The poisonal were threads in a tapestry of greed and betrayal. But whose hand wove the pattern? A faint scrape from above snapped him out of his reverie. He extinguished the candle and pressed himself against the wall, his heart steady despite the darkness. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate. Poirot held his breath, his hand closing around the small pocket knife he always carried as precaution. Not a weapon. The footsteps stopped, and a voice whispered, "Poirot, are you down there?" It was Charles. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm. "Oui, monsieur. And you, it seems, cannot resist following me." Charles's silhouette appeared at the base of the stairs, his face barely visible in the dim light. "I didn't attack the colonel," he said quickly. "Came to warn you. Someone's watching you, someone who knows about the vault." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And how do you know of the vault, monsieur?" Charles hesitated, then sighed. "I overheard Hargrove talking about it in the library. He said the necklace was the key, that it unlocked something greater. I wanted to find it first." "Greed, monsieur, is a dangerous motivator," Poirot said, his tone sharp. "But come, let us return to the surface. The vault will wait, but the colonel may not." They ascended together, Poirot's mind whirling. Charles's story was plausible, but his presence in the chapel raised questions. Had he followed Poirot to warn him, or to ensure the vault remained unopened? Hey, and what of the colonel's attacker? The night was far from over, and Poirot knew the truth was closer than ever. Back in the chapel, the butler and 2 footmen had arrived, tending to the colonel. Poirot directed them to move the injured man to a guest room, then turned to Charles. "You will remain where I can see you, monsieur. The dance of motives continues, and Hercule Poirot will not be outstepped." Chapter 6. The chapel's secret. The Yorkshire moors stretched endlessly beyond Blackthorn Manor, their rolling shadows whispering secrets under a leaden sky. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the manor's frost-kissed lawn, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp eyes fixed on the chapel's weathered stone silhouette. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine, but Poirot's mind was far from the tranquility of the landscape. The events of the previous night, the poisoned champagne, the empty vault, the tangled web of motives had sharpened his focus to a razor's edge. The little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, were humming with purpose. The chapel, squat Gothic structure tucked behind a grove of yew trees, had become the nexus of his investigation. The miniature map he'd found in the dusty locket pointed to a hidden vault beneath its ancient stones, but the vault had yielded nothing but fingerprints and questions. Now, as the manor's guests nursed their suspicions and fears over breakfast, Poirot resolved to return to the chapel. Something about its silent sanctity nagged at him, a conviction that it held more than dusty hymnals and forgotten prayers. He adjusted his scarf against a chill and strode purposefully toward the chapel. His polished shoes crunching on the gravel path. The manor loomed behind him, its ivy-clad walls watching like a silent sentinel. The guests, he knew, were still reeling from the poisoning attempt at the ball. The victim, a nervous young maid who'd accidentally sipped from Poirot's glass, was recovering in her quarters, thanks to his quick thinking with an antidote remedy he always carried after a particularly harrowing case in Cairo years ago. But the incident had shifted the atmosphere in the manor from tense curiosity to outright dread. Someone among them was not merely a thief, but a would-be murderer. As Poirot approached the chapel, its heavy oak door creaked open, revealing a dim interior lit by slivers of light through stained glass windows. The air inside was cool and musty, scented with old wood and wax. The pews, carved with intricate floral motifs, stood in neat rows, leading to a modest altar draped in white linen. Above it, a crucifix hung, its somber figure casting a long shadow across the stone floor. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting every detail: the worn prayer books, the flickering votive candles, the faint scratches on the flagstones near the altar. Something was here. He was certain something the mastermind behind this affair did not want him to find. He knelt before the altar, his fingers tracing the edges of the flagstones. The miniature map had been precise, indicating a compartment beneath the chapel's heart. Last night's discovery of the empty vault had been a disappointment. Poirot suspected it was a decoy, a clever misdirection to throw him off the trail. He pressed gently on the stones, testing for give, his movements methodical and unhurried. The chapel was silent, save for the distant cry of a moorland bird, but Poirot's instincts told him he was not alone. He paused, his head tilting slightly, listening for the faintest disturbance. A soft shuffle came from the shadows near the vestry door. Poirot rose smoothly, his demeanor calm but alert. "Bon matin," he called softly, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "It is not polite, you know, to spy on Hercule Poirot." The shadow stirred, and Vivienne Duval, the glamorous actress, stepped into the light. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, but her face was pale, her emerald eyes darting. Nervously, she wore a tailored coat over her silk dress, as if she'd planned to slip away unnoticed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and tremulous, "I didn't expect to find you here, and yet here we both are." Poirot replied, his mustache twitching slightly. "The chapel, it seems, is a place of great interest this morning. I inquire what brings you to this sacred place at such an early hour?" Vivienne hesitated, her gloved hands twisting together. I couldn't sleep," she said. After last night the poison, because I needed somewhere quiet to think. This place, it feels safe." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained polite. "Safe, mademoiselle? Or perhaps it is the secrets of this chapel that draw you. The vault, the treasure, the whispers of the Blackthorn legacy." Her lips parted in surprise, but she quickly recovered, her actress's poise returning. "You're too clever, Monsieur Poirot," she said with a forced laugh. "I'm just a guest here, caught up in this dreadful mess. I don't know anything about vaults or treasures." "Perhaps," Poirot said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "But you're not merely a guest, are you, Mademoiselle Duval? Your presence here, your connection to this manor, is more than a coincidence now." Vivienne's composure faltered, her eyes flickering toward the altar. "What are you implying?" she asked, her tone sharp. Poirot gestured to the chapel around them. "This place, it holds the key to the mystery, I think. And you, mademoiselle, know more than you say. Shall we speak plainly? Must Hercule Poirot unravel your secrets, one by one?" Before Vivienne could respond, a loud creak echoed through the chapel. The vestry door swung open, and Dr. Hargrove, the reclusive scholar, emerged. His wiry frame hunched slightly as he clutched a leather-bound notebook. His spectacles glinted in the dim light, and his expression was one of startled guilt. "Monsieur Poirot, Miss Duval," he exclaimed, his voice higher than usual. "I didn't realize anyone was here." Poirot's gaze flicked between the two, his mind racing. "Curious coincidence," he said smoothly. "Two guests, both drawn to the chapel at dawn. Tell me, Dr. Hargrove, what brings you here? Another study of the Blackthorn family's history, perhaps?" Hargrove adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I was reviewing some notes," he said, holding up the notebook as if it were a shield. "The chapel's architecture is fascinating. It's Gothic, 14th century, with some unusual modifications. I thought I might find something relevant to my research." Poirot's smile was almost imperceptible. "And did you find it, monsieur? Is there something more tangible that you seek?" Hargrove's face reddened, but before he could answer, Poirot's attention returned to the altar. He knelt again, his fingers brushing over a particular flagstone that seemed slightly raised. With a gentle push, it shifted, revealing a narrow crevice. Vivian and Hargrove watched in silence, their tension palpable. Poirot reached into the crevice, his movements deliberate, and withdrew a small, leather-bound ledger. Its pages yellowed with age. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, opening the ledger carefully. The pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, detailing shipments, dates, and names records of the Blackthorn family's smuggling operations from centuries past. But what caught Poirot's eye were the more recent entries, written in a different hand, listing names that were startlingly familiar. Charles Blackthorn, Lady Eleanor's nephew, and a cryptic initial V. Poirot closed the ledger and stood, his expression unreadable. "This," he said, holding up the book, "is no mere relic. It is a map of motives, a chronicle of greed. And you, mademoiselle, monsieur, you are both entangled in its pages." The deviant's eyes widened. "You can't possibly think I'm involved in this. It's madness," she protested. "Came to Blackthorn Manor because Lady Eleanor invited me. I didn't even know about the treasure until Dr. Hargrove mentioned it." Hargrove's mouth tightened. "She's telling the truth, Poirot. I'm the one who brought up the legend. My research into the Blackthorn family led me here. I thought the treasure might be real, but I swear I haven't done anything criminal." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "The truth? It is a slippery thing, Nan. But let us test your sincerity. Mademoiselle Duval, you are a Blackthorn, are you not? A distant cousin, perhaps, lured here by whispers of wealth?" Vivian froze, her breath catching. After a long moment, she nodded, her shoulders slumping. She admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother was a Blackthorn, disowned years ago. Lady Eleanor contacted me a month ago, promising a share of the family fortune if I helped her with something. She wasn't clear. I thought it was just about the necklace, but then I heard about the treasure, and—" She trailed off, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Poirot turned to Hargrove. "And you, monsieur? Your interest in the Blackthorn history, it is more than academic, I think." Hargrove sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "My family, they were rivals to the Blackthorns centuries ago. The smuggler's treasure was stolen from us, or so my grandfather claimed. I came here to find proof, to reclaim what was ours, but I didn't poison anyone, Poirot. I wouldn't." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The ledger, the vault, the poisoning gall pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a simple theft. But before he could press further, a sharp clatter came from the chapel's rear entrance. The trio turned to see the colonel, his face flushed with anger, standing in the doorway, a heavy candlestick in his hand. "What the devil is going on here?" he barked, his military bearing barely containing his rage. "Poirot, you're stirring up trouble," poking your nose where it doesn't belong. Poirot raised an eyebrow, unfazed. On the contrary, Colonel, it is my nose that will lead us to the truth. And you, monsieur, seem most anxious to keep it hidden. Why is that? The Colonel's grip on the candlestick tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes darting to Vivian and Hargrove. Poirot noted the exchange, his suspicions deepening. Come, he said, gesturing to the ledger. Let us return to the manor. There is much to discuss, and I believe the time for secrets is at an end. Back in the manor's drawing room, Poirot gathered the guests, the ledger placed prominently on the table before them. Lady Eleanor sat at the head, her face a mask of composed dignity, though her fingers trembled slightly. Charles, the nephew, slouched in a chair, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. The butler, Mr. Grayson, stood in the corner, his confession about the necklace theft hanging over him like a storm cloud. Poirot opened the ledger, his voice steady as he read aloud the names and dates. This document, he said, is a testament to the Blackthorne family's past and its present. It speaks of smuggling, of betrayal, and of a treasure that has driven men and women to desperate acts. But it is the recent entries that interest me most. Monsieur Charles, your name appears here, alongside another V. I wonder, who might this be? All eyes turned to Vivian, who shrank under the scrutiny. I told you, she said, her voice breaking. I'm a Blackthorne, but I didn't write that ledger. I didn't even know it existed until now. Charles leaped to his feet, his face pale. This is absurd. I'm being framed. I had nothing to do with any smuggling or treasure nonsense. I was in the garden during the theft, just as I said. Poirot's mustache twitched. The garden. Yes, and yet the mud on your shoes matches the earth near the library window. Curious detail, Nan. And you, Colonel, your medals, they are not what they seem. A jeweler in London confirmed they are replicas. Why would a man of your supposed valor wear false honors? The Colonel's face darkened. You're out of line, Poirot, he growled. My past is none of your business. Okay, but it is my business, Poirot countered, his tone sharp. For your past, I suspect, is tied to the Blackthorne families. Sins? A vendetta, perhaps. A grudge against Lady Eleanor or her ancestors. Lady Eleanor's composure cracked, her voice rising. Enough, Monsieur Poirot. You go too far. This manner, this family, we have suffered enough without your accusations. Poirot held up a hand, his eyes gleaming. Suffered, we, but not without cause. The ledger, the vault, the poison, these are not random acts. They are the threads of a tapestry woven by someone in this room, and I, Hercule Poirot, will unravel it. As the tension in the room reached a breaking point, a faint sound came from the hallway, muffled whisper, barely audible. Poirot's head snapped toward the door, his senses alert. Monsieur Grayson, he said, turning to the butler, please check the corridor. I believe we have an uninvited listener. Grayson hurried to the door, but before he could open it, a figure darted past the window, a shadow, fleeting but unmistakable. Poirot sprang to his feet, his agility surprising for a man of his stature. After them, he cried, leading the charge to the manor's front door. The pursuit led them to the rose garden, where the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers. The shadow had vanished, but Poirot's eyes scanned the ground, spotting a disturbed patch of earth near a cluster of roses. He knelt, digging carefully with a pocket knife, and unearthed a small metal box. Inside was a single key, its surface etched with the Blackthorne family crest. The key to the vault, Poirot murmured, holding it aloft. But not the decoy vault we found last night. The true vault, I believe, lies elsewhere, perhaps closer than we think. As the group returned to the manor, Poirot's mind raced. The ledger had confirmed Vivian's connection to the Blackthornes and hinted at Charles's involvement. but the Colonel's secrets and Lady Eleanor's silence suggested deeper layers to the conspiracy. And now, the key, tangible clue to the treasure that had sparked this deadly game. That evening, Poirot retired to his room. The ledger and key locked in a small case he kept under his pillow. But sleep eluded him. The chapel's secret was only half revealed, and the whispered conversation he'd overheard in the drawing room lingered in his mind. Charles and an unknown figure plotting to end it tonight. The words were a warning, a promise of further danger. At midnight, a soft knock came at his door. Poirot opened it to find Vivian, her face pale but determined. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I need to tell you something. It's about Charles and the Colonel. I overheard them in the chapel this afternoon. They're planning something terrible." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Speak, mademoiselle. Every detail, if you please." She took a deep breath. "They were talking about the whodunit, the one you found, but another, hidden in the manor's west wing. Charles said he'd get the key tonight, no matter what it took. And the Colonel, he mentioned a name, Hargrove. He said Hargrove was the key to everything." Poirot's heart quickened, but his expression remained calm. "Mercy, mademoiselle. You have done well to tell me this. Now, return to your room and lock the door. The night, I fear, is not yet over." As Vivian slipped away, Poirot donned his dressing gown and slipped the key into his pocket. The West Wing unexplored until now was his next destination. The chapel had yielded its first secret, but the manor itself was a labyrinth of lies, and Poirot was determined to navigate it to the end. Chapter 7. The Midnight Confrontation. The moon hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its pale light filtering through the tall, arched windows of the drawing room, casting elongated shadows that danced across the oak-paneled walls. The air was thick with tension, the kind that precedes a storm. As Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, precise figure commanding the attention of the gathered guests. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward midnight, each second amplifying the unease that clung to the manor like damp fog. The events of the past days, the theft of Lady Eleanor's sapphire necklace, the poisoned champagne, the cryptic clues, and the hidden passages had woven a web of suspicion that Poirot was now determined to untangle. The drawing room, with its heavy velvet curtains and gilt-framed portraits, felt like a stage set for a drama of betrayal. The guests sat in a semicircle of backed chairs, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Colonel Reginald Dashby, his mustache twitching, with barely concealed irritation, gripped the armrests of his chair. Vivian Laurent, the glamorous actress, lounged with a practiced air of nonchalance, though her eyes darted nervously toward the door. Dr. Simon Hargrove, the reclusive scholar, clutched a leather-bound notebook, his knuckles white. Charles Blackthorn, Lady Eleanor's estranged nephew, slouched with a sullen defiance, smutty shoes betraying his earlier lie about his whereabouts. Lady Eleanor herself sat apart, her regal posture unyielding, though her fingers toyed with the lace edge of her shawl. The butler, Mr. Grayson, stood by the door, his confession to stealing the necklace still hanging over the room like a guillotine. Poirot had orchestrated this late-night gathering under the pretense of a card game, a ruse to draw the conspirators into the open. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, his sharp eyes scanning each face as he prepared to lay his cards, both literal and metaphorical, on the table. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of authority. "Tonight, we shall play a game, not of chance, but of truth. The theft of the sapphire necklace, the attempt on a life, the secrets buried in this manor, they are all pieces of a puzzle that Hercule Poirot will now assemble." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their silence louder than any protest. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the polished floor. "The necklace, it was stolen by Monsieur Grayson," he said, gesturing toward the butler, who hung his head. "But he was merely a pawn, n'est-ce pas? A man desperate to settle debts, manipulated by another. The question is, who is this mastermind, and what is their true aim?" Charles Blackthorne leaned forward, his jaw tight. "I've had enough of this charade, Poirot. If you've got something to say, spit it out." "I was in the garden when the necklace was taken. I have told you that." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "The garden, Monsieur Charles. A curious choice for a midnight stroll. And yet, the mud on your shoes, caked, thick, as if you climbed through a window, tells a different story. Perhaps the window of the library where a torn diary page was found." Charles's face reddened, but before he could retort, Vivian interjected, her voice smooth as velvet but sharp as a blade. "Really, Mr. Poirot? You're grasping at straws. Charles is hardly the criminal mastermind you're painting him to be. He's far too predictable." Her laugh was light, but it carried an edge that made Charles glare at her. "Predictable, Mademoiselle Laurent." Poirot tilted his head. "Or perhaps loyal to a cause, a person that compels him to act against his better judgment. Heart, it can be a powerful motivator, Nan." The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the group. Lady Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice steady but laced with impatience. "Mr. Poirot, I invited you here to resolve a theft, not to spin tales of conspiracy. If you have evidence, present it." Poirot nodded, undeterred. "Patience, madame. Devinance, it is like a fine wine, it must be savored at the right moment. But let us consider the motives. The necklace, it is not merely a jewel, but a key, is it not? Key to the lost treasure of Blackthorne Manor, hidden by your ancestor, the smuggler. Someone in this room seeks that treasure, and they will stop at nothing, not theft, not poison, not even murder." Dr. Hargrove's notebook slipped from his hands, landing with a soft thud on the floor. He scrambled to retrieve it, his face pale. "This is preposterous," he stammered. "I'm a scholar, not a treasure hunter. I came here to study the manor's history, nothing more. History, Monsieur Hargrove." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Or perhaps the history of your own family, a rival to the Blackthorns, who lost their fortune to the smuggler's schemes. The ledger in the chapel suggests connections that are most intriguing." The colonel snorted, breaking the tension. "This is all nonsense. Smugglers, treasures, ledgers. What next? Ghosts. I say, we call the police and be done with it." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "The police, Colonel, will come in time. But first, we must confront the truth. Monsieur Charles, you have been most cooperative in your silence, but now, I insist, you speak. Who is your accomplice? The one who promised you a share of the treasure?" Charles's eyes widened, his hands clenching into fists. "I don't know what you're talking about," he growled, but his voice wavered. "I took the necklace. Yes, but only because I was told to. Didn't want to hurt anyone." "Told by whom?" Poirot pressed, stepping closer. "Speak, monsieur, or the consequences will be most severe." The room seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Charles opened his mouth, his lips trembling as he struggled to form the words. Tanked. It was a deafening crack, shattered the silence. The window behind. Charles exploding in a shower of glass. Charles cried out, clutching his shoulder as he collapsed to the floor, blood seeping through his fingers. The guests screamed, chairs toppling as they scrambled for cover. Vivian dove behind a sofa, her composure shattered, while Lady Eleanor froze, her eyes wide with horror. Dr. Hargrove dropped to his knees, muttering incoherently, and the colonel, barked orders as if commanding a battlefield. Poirot, unruffled, knelt beside Charles, his nimble fingers tearing a strip from his own handkerchief to press against the wound. "Calm yourselves," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The shot came from outside. "Monsieur Grayson, secure the doors. Colonel, assist me with Monsieur Charles." The butler, pale but obedient, bolted the drawing-room doors, while the colonel, grumbling, helped lift Charles onto a chaise longue. Poirot's mind raced, cataloging every detail, the angle of the shot, the shattered glass, the timing. This was no random act, it was a desperate attempt to silence Charles before he could name his accomplice. "Vivian," Poirot said sharply, turning to the actress, who peeked out from behind the sofa. "You were closest to the window. Did you see anything?" She shook her head, her hands trembling. "It was too dark. I heard the shot, and then glass everywhere. I thought we were all going to die." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Fear seemed genuine, but her quick recovery betrayed a performer's instinct. He turned to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, this matter has many secrets, but its grounds are not so vast. The shooter cannot have gone far. I suggest we search immediately." Lady Eleanor nodded, her composure returning. "Grayson, fetch the groundskeeper and the stable boy. They know the estate better than anyone." As Grayson hurried out, Poirot directed the colonel and Dr. Hargrove to guard the room, ensuring no one left. He slipped out through a side door, his small flashlight cutting through the darkness of the manor's sprawling grounds. The night was cold, the Yorkshire moors stretching endlessly under the moon's gaze. Poirot moved with purpose, his senses attuned to every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig near the edge of the rose garden. He spotted a glint of metal in the grass, a discarded rifle, its barrel still warm. He crouched, examining it carefully. The stock was engraved with the initials J.T. Not a guest, but perhaps a hired hand. Poirot's mind flashed to the ledger in the chapel, which mentioned a local smugglers' gang still active in the region. Could they be tied to the manor's secrets? He returned to the drawing room, the rifle wrapped in his coat to preserve evidence. Charles, now conscious but weak, lay on the chaise, his face ashen. Poirot knelt beside him, his voice low and urgent. "Monsieur Charles, you must tell me now. Who is behind this? Who coerced you?" Charles's eyes fluttered, his breath shallow. "Hargrove," he whispered, the name barely audible. It was Hargrove. His head lolled back, and he slipped into unconsciousness. The room erupted in gasps. Dr. Hargrove leaped to his feet, his notebook falling once more. "That's a lie," he shouted. "I'm no criminal. I've spent my life studying, not scheming." Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. "We shall see, Monsieur Hargrove. The truth, it always reveals itself. For now, we tend to Monsieur Charles and secure the manor. The night is not yet over." The hours that followed were a blur of activity. The groundskeeper and stable boy returned, reporting no sign of the shooter, though they found fresh footprints leading toward the moors. A local doctor, summoned by Lady Eleanor, arrived to stabilize Charles, confirming the bullet had grazed his shoulder, a painful but non-lethal wound. Poirot, meanwhile, retreated to a quiet corner of the drawing room, his notebook open as he sketched a timeline of events. The rifle's initials, J.T., gnawed at him. They matched no guest, but the ledger's cryptic entries hinted at a network of players beyond the manor's walls. Charles's whispered accusation against Hargrove was compelling, but Poirot knew better than to trust a single thread in a tapestry of deception. Hargrove's scholarly demeanor could be a mask, but so could Vivian's theatrics or the colonel's bluster. In Lady Eleanor, her calm authority suggested a woman who knew more than she revealed. As dawn approached, Poirot gathered the guests once more, their faces haggard from the sleepless night. "Mies Amos," he said, his voice steady. "The shot was meant to silence, but it has only sharpened our focus. Monsieur Charles has named Dr. Hargrove, but the truth is, like a diamond, it has many facets. Tomorrow, we shall explore the scholar's secrets in the rose garden, where Mademoiselle Vivian's message suggests answers lie." Vivian's eyes widened. "Message? I left no message." Poirot smiled faintly. "Did you not, mademoiselle? Then, perhaps, someone wishes us to believe you did. The game, it continues." Chapter 8. The Scholar's Deception. The air in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with suspicion, the kind that clung to the walls like the damp of the Yorkshire moors. Hercule Poirot stood in the dimly lit corridor outside Dr. Hargrove's room, his polished shoes silent on the ancient rug. The events of the previous night, the gunshot, Charles's collapse, the whispered accusation had set his little gray cells into overdrive. The scholar, Dr. Reginald Hargrove, had emerged as a figure of intrigue, his quiet demeanor now a mask for secrets Poirot was determined to unpeel. The morning light, gray and reluctant, filtered through the manor's tall windows, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of hidden truths. Poirot adjusted his mustache, a habit when his mind was at its sharpest, and knocked on Hargrove's door. The wood creaked under his knuckles, echoing in the stillness. No answer. He knocked again, more insistently. A muffled shuffle from within. Then the door opened a crack, revealing Hargrove's bespectacled face, pale and drawn, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. "Monsieur Poirot," Hargrove said, his voice a strained attempt at civility. "To what do I owe this early visit?" Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding, a blade wrapped in silk. "Dr. Hargrove, there are matters of grave importance we must discuss. May I enter?" Hargrove hesitated, his fingers tightening on the doorframe, but he stepped aside, gesturing Poirot into the room. The scholars' quarters were a study in organized chaos, books piled high on every surface, papers strewn across a desk, and a faint smell of ink and old parchment. A single candle burned low, its wax pooling like spilled secrets. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting a half-packed valise in the corner, a sign of flight, perhaps. "Dr. Hargrove," Poirot began, settling into a creaking chair without waiting for an invitation. "You have been most forthcoming about the Blackthorn family legend, the smuggler's treasure, and the cursed sapphire. Yet I find myself puzzled. Why, I ask, did you slip a coded note under my door, warning me to abandon my investigation? And why does Charles, wounded and clinging to life, whisper your name as the architect of his misfortune?" Hargrove's face blanched, his hands fumbling with a quill on the desk. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. I wrote no note, and Charles, he must be delirious. I've done nothing to harm him." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice soft but piercing. "Nan, mon ami. The little gray cells, they do not lie. The note was written in your hand, precise, scholarly, with the flourish of a man who loves his letters. And the rifle, discarded in the rose garden, bears initials that trace back to a family you know well. Shall we discuss the Hargroves and their rivalry with the Blackthorns? Or shall we speak of the diagram I suspect you possess, one that maps the manor's secret passages?" Hargrove's composure cracked, his shoulders sagging as he sank into a chair. "You're relentless, Poirot," he muttered, pushing his spectacles up his nose. "Very well, I wrote the note. I thought it would scare you off, make you leave the manor. I didn't want you digging into things that don't concern you." Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped over his cane. "And why, Dr. Hargrove, would my investigation trouble you so? What is it you fear I will uncover?" Hargrove's gaze flickered to the valise, then back to Poirot. "It's not fear, it's history. My family, The Hargroves were wronged by the Blackthorns centuries ago. That smuggler, Lady Eleanor's great-grandfather, cheated my ancestors out of their share of the treasure. I came here to reclaim what's mine, to restore my family's honor. The necklace, the passages, the vaultets, all part of it. Teaser, I didn't shoot Charles. Teaser, I'm a scholar, not a murderer. Poirot's expression remained unreadable, though his mind was a whirlwind of connections. Scholar oui, but one with a diagram of secret passages. Nan, one who knows more than he claims. Tell me, Dr. Hargrove, where is this diagram? And what does it reveal about the manor's hidden truths? Hargrove's hands trembled as he reached for a leather-bound notebook on the desk. He hesitated, then slid it toward Poirot. It's in there. Found it in the library, tucked inside an old volume of Blackthorn family records. It maps every passage, every hidden door. I thought it would lead me to the treasure. Poirot opened the notebook, his fingers tracing the intricate lines of a hand-drawn diagram. The manor's layout unfolded before him, a labyrinth of tunnels weaving beneath the floors, connecting the chapel, the cellars, and a dozen other rooms. One passage, marked with a red X, led to the rose garden of place, Vivian's cryptic. Message had pointed to, the truth lies where the roses bloom. Mercy, Dr. Hargrove, Poirot said, closing the notebook with a snap. You have been most helpful, but I must ask, where is Mademoiselle Vivian? She has vanished, leaving only her message. Do you know her whereabouts? Hargrove's eyes widened, genuine surprise flashing across his face. Vivian, gone. I saw her last night, after the shooting. She was in the chapel, muttering something about roses. I thought she was distraught, perhaps drunk. I didn't think Poirot stood, his movements deliberate. You thought wrong, monsieur. The game, it grows more dangerous. Stay here, and do not leave this room until I return. The truth, it is close, but it is a sharp blade. Leaving Hargrove in his cluttered sanctuary, Poirot descended the manor's grand staircase, the diagram tucked under his arm. The rose garden beckoned, its significance now undeniable. The morning mist clung to the moors, shrouding the garden in an ethereal haze as Poirot stepped outside. The roses, vibrant even in the gray light, formed a circular bed near the chapel's outer wall. He knelt, his gloved hands brushing aside damp earth, searching for the truth Vivian's message promised. Minutes passed. The silence broken only by the distant call of a moorland bird. Then his fingers struck something hard, a metal box, rusted but intact, buried shallowly beneath a rose bush. Poirot pried it open, revealing a single key, its surface etched with the blackthorn crest. The vault key, he realized, the one that would unlock the chapel's hidden treasure. But as he held it, a shadow fell across the garden. Monsieur Poirot, came a voice, low and menacing. It was the colonel, or rather, the man posing as Colonel Rutherford, his military medals exposed as fakes. He stood at the garden's edge, a revolver glinting in his hand. You're too clever for your own good. Drop the key. Poirot rose slowly, his calm unshaken. Monsieur, you mistake me for a man who is easily intimidated. This key, it is the heart of the mystery, Nan. Why do you want it so badly? The colonel's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with desperation. You don't understand, Poirot. That vault holds more than treasure. It's power documents that could ruin families, businesses, even governments. I was hired to get them, and I won't let a meddling detective stop me. Hired by whom? Poirot asked, his voice steady, though he noted the colonel's unsteady grip on the revolver. Or another player in this game of shadows. The colonel laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? Lady Eleanor's just a pawn, like the rest of us. The real power's been pulling strings from the start. Now, Hand over the key, or I'll lay. Rustle in the bushes cut him off. Vivienne emerged, her dress torn, her face pale but resolute. "Don't, Rutherford," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Poirot, he's lying. The documents aren't about power, they're about the smuggling ring. My family's tied to it, and so is his. We were both coerced, but I couldn't go through with it." The colonel's revolver swung toward Vivienne, but Poirot was faster. With a flick of his cane, he knocked the weapon from the colonel's hand, sending it skittering into the roses. "Enough," Monsieur Poirot said, his voice now a command. "The game, it is over. Mademoiselle Vivienne, you will explain everything. And you, Colonel, or whoever you rule, will remain silent." Vivienne's story spilled out in a rush. She had been blackmailed into coming to Blackthorn Manor, promised a share of the treasure if she helped steal the necklace. But the real goal was the vault's contents, ledgers detailing a modern smuggling ring, one that had inherited the Blackthorn smugglers' network. She had fled to the Rose Garden after the shooting, hiding the key to protect it from the colonel and his unseen employer. Her message, left in haste, was meant for Poirot's plea for help. Poirot listened, his mind weaving her words into the tapestry of the case. The colonel, subdued but defiant, offered no further resistance as Poirot retrieved the revolver. With Vivienne's help, Poirot returned to the chapel, the key heavy in his pocket. The vault, hidden behind the altar, awaited. He inserted the key, turning it with a click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent chapel. The door swung open, revealing a stone chamber. But as Poirot stepped inside, a low rumble sounded, a trap, triggered by the vault's opening. The ceiling groaned, and a slab of stone began to descend, threatening to seal him inside. Poirot's mind raced, his eyes scanning the chamber for an escape. A lever, half hidden in the shadows, caught his attention. With a desperate lunge, he pulled it, halting the trap just inches above his head. Panting, Poirot stepped back, his heart pounding but his resolve unbroken. The vault was empty, save for a single sheet of paper, a list of names, dates, and transactions, confirming the smuggling ring's existence. The treasure, it seemed, had been moved, but the evidence remained. Poirot tucked the paper into his coat. Knowing the mastermind still at large had gone to great lengths to protect this secret as he emerged from the chapel. Vivienne and the colonel in tow, Poirot's thoughts turned to Lady Eleanor. Role in this drama was unclear, but her knowledge of the manor's secrets made her a likely orchestrator. The chapter closed with Poirot striding back to the manor, the key and the paper in his possession, the weight of the truth pressing against his chest. The mastermind's desperation had revealed their hand, but the final move was Poirot's to make. Chapter 9. The web tightens. The air in Blackthorn Manor's grand drawing room was thick with tension, as though the very walls held their breath. The massive chandelier above cast flickering shadows across the ornate rugs, its crystal prisms catching the firelight and scattering it in fractured glints. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, precise figure an unlikely anchor amidst the storm of suspicion swirling around him. The remaining guests, Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, Dr. Hargrove, the colonel, or rather, the impostor who had posed as one, and a shaken but defiant Vivienne, who had returned moments ago from her mysterious absence, sat in a semicircle of backed chairs. Their faces were a gallery of unease. Lady Eleanor's lips were pursed, her eyes sharp with guarded calculation. Dr. Hargrove clutched a leather-bound notebook, his knuckles white. The colonel's false bravado faltered as he avoided Poirot's gaze, and Vivienne, her glamorous facade cracking, twisted a silk handkerchief in her hands. Poirot adjusted his impeccable bow tie, his movements deliberate, almost theatrical. "Mies, Amos," he began, his voice soft yet commanding. slicing through the heavy silence. The hour has come to untangle the web of deceit that has ensnared Blackthorn Manor. The theft of the sapphire necklace, to test the poisoned champagne, the shot fired in the night. These are not mere isolated acts of villainy. Nan, they are threads in a tapestry, woven by a hand most cunning, most desperate. His dark eyes swept the room, lingering on each face as though peering into their very souls. And that hand, I regret to say, belongs to one among us. Collective gasp rippled through the group. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her pearl necklace, her composure fraying. Monsieur Poirot, this is preposterous, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with indignation. To suggest that I, the mistress of this house, or any of my guests, could orchestrate such chaos. Patience, Lady Eleanor Poirot interrupted, raising a manicured hand. Hercule Poirot does not speak without evidence. The little gray cells, they have been at work, and they have uncovered a truth most startling. But let us proceed with order and method. We pace slowly, his polished shoes tapping rhythmically against the polished oak floor. We begin with the necklace, the sapphire that has drawn us all into this dance of motives. It was stolen, we know, by Mr. Grayson, the butler, who confessed to his crime. But Grayson was a pawn, manipulated by another. The necklace was not the true prize, was it? Then, it was a key to a treasure long buried within these walls. A treasure tied to the Blackthorn family's shadowed past. Dr. Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, his spectacles glinting as he leaned forward. Monsieur Poirot, you've spoken of this treasure before. It's the smuggler's hoard. The legend is all speculation. There's no proof such a thing exists. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. Speculation, Dr. Hargrove. None. The proof lies in the clues we have uncovered. The torn diary page, the miniature map, the ledger in the chapel. These are not fictions. They point to a vault, a secret guarded for generations. And someone in this room believed so fiercely in its existence that they were willing to kill to claim it. The colonel, his face flushed, slammed a fist on the arm of his chair. Enough of this nonsense, Poirot. You've been poking about, stirring up trouble, but you've got nothing solid. You're fishing, that's all. His voice, gruff and unsteady, betrayed the cracks in his assumed authority. Poirot turned to him, his expression unyielding. Fishing, monsieur? Perhaps. But Hercule Poirot casts his net with precision. Let us consider your own role, Colonel. Your medals, they are counterfeit, are they not? Your tales of military valor, of fabrication? You came to Blackthorn Manor not as a guest, but as a hunter, seeking to settle an old score against the Blackthorn family. Your vendetta, it is personal. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence louder than any protest. Vivian, seizing the moment, leaned forward, her voice sharp. He's not the only one with secrets, Poirot. What about Charles? He's been skulking about, whispering in corners, plotting who knows what. And that shot last night, he was the target, wasn't he? Why? Poirot nodded, acknowledging her deflection. Mademoiselle Vivian, your keen observation is noted. Charles, the nephew, indeed, played a part in this drama. He confessed to aiding an accomplice, coerced into stealing the necklace. But his role, like Grayson's, was that of a puppet. The strings, they are held by another. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And you, mademoiselle, have not been entirely forthcoming. Your sudden disappearance, your cryptic message about the roses, why did you flee? Only to return so conveniently. Vivian's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly, tossing her auburn hair. I was frightened, Monsieur Poirot's house, these people, is all too much. I needed air, that's all. And the message. I thought it might help you find the truth. Help. Poirot's tone was laced with skepticism. Or mislead. The box in the rose garden, containing the key to the vault, was a clever touch, but it was also a trap designed to crush the unwary. You knew of the vault, did you not? As a distant cousin of the Blackthorns, you, too, sought the treasure. Octavian's composure faltered, her handkerchief twisting tighter. I didn't set the trap. I only wanted to find the truth about my family, about what's rightfully mine. Enough. Lady Eleanor rose from her chair, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Monsieur Poirot, you accuse us all, yet you dance around the truth. If you know who is behind this, name them. Stop these games. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. Very well, Lady Eleanor. The time for games is over. It's the mastermind, the one who has orchestrated this entire charade, the poison, the shot, and the night is none other than you. The room erupted in chaos. Dr. Hargrove dropped his notebook. The colonel sputtered incoherently, and Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lady Eleanor, however, stood frozen, her face a mask of icy control. This is outrageous, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Accuse me in my own home. Poirot remained unruffled. We, Lady Eleanor, I dare, for it is the truth. Allow me to explain, with order and method, how the little gray cells arrived at this conclusion. He began to pace again, his voice steady and deliberate. From the moment I received your letter, I sensed a purpose beyond a simple weekend gathering. The invitation was vague, hinting at grave importance, yet you offered no details. Why invite Hercule Poirot, a detective, unless you anticipated a crime? The theft of the sapphire necklace was a spark, but it was a spark you ignited. Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot? This is conjecture. Conjecture. Poirot's smile was almost pitying. None, madame. Let us consider the facts. The necklace was stolen from a locked safe, accessible only by a master key held by Mr. Grayson. But Grayson, a man desperate and easily swayed, was not the architect of this theft. He was instructed by you. You knew of his gambling debts, his vulnerability. You used him to stage the theft, to draw attention to the necklace and awaken the greed of those who sought to smuggle his treasure. Dr. Hargrove, his voice trembling, interjected, but why? Why would Lady Eleanor risk her own necklace, her own reputation? Poirot turned to him, his expression grave. To flush out the vultures, Dr. Hargrove. Lady Eleanor knew of the treasure. It's a legacy of her great-grandfather, the smuggler. She knew, too, that others' relatives, impostors, enemies, coveted it. By staging the theft, she created a lure, a test to reveal those who would betray her. The necklace was bait, nothing more. The colonel, his face pale, muttered, "That's absurd. Why go to such lengths? Why not just guard the treasure?" "'Cause," Poirot said, his voice rising slightly, "the treasure is not what you all believe it to be. It is not gold, nor jewels, nor riches. It is knowledge, dangerous knowledge. The ledger in the chapel, the documents in the vault, they reveal the smuggler's network, web of crime that persists to this day. Lady Eleanor sought to protect her family's name, to keep this secret buried. But she also wished to unmask those who would exploit it." Vivian, her voice shaking, spoke up. "Then the poison, the shot, those were her doing too." Poirot nodded. "Oui, mademoiselle. The poisoned champagne, meant for me, was a warning to cease my investigation. The shot at Charles, a calculated act to silence a conspirator who knew too much. Lady Eleanor, you played a dangerous game, manipulating those around you to protect your legacy. But you underestimated Hercule Poirot." Lady Eleanor's mask finally cracked, her shoulders slumped, and she sank back into her chair, her face etched with resignation. "You're right, Monsieur Poirot," she said softly. "Did it all. It's the necklace, the theft, the traps. orchestrated everything. I wanted to know who I could trust, who would betray me for the promise of wealth. My family's name has been tainted by that smuggler's legacy for too long. I couldn't let it destroy us further. The room fell, silent, the weight of her confession settling over them like a fog. Dr. Hargrove stared at the floor, his scholarly curiosity replaced by shame. The colonel, exposed as a fraud, seemed to shrink in his chair. Vivian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Her dreams of inheritance shattered. Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze remained piercing. Madame, your intentions may have been to protect, but your methods were reckless. Lives were endangered, Charles lies wounded, a guest nearly died by poison. You have played the puppet master, but the strings have tangled. Lady Eleanor looked up, her eyes pleading. The documents, Monsieur Poirot, ones in the vault. They named names, powerful names, still active in the smuggling trade. If they're exposed, my family will be ruined. I beg you, destroy them. Let this end here. Poirot regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The truth, Lady Eleanor, is a double-edged sword. It can destroy, but it can also redeem. Hercule Poirot does not decide the fate of justice lightly, but I will consider your request. He turned to the others, his voice firm. The police are on their way, summoned by my telegram this morning. Its conspirators, Grayson, Charles, and those who aided them will face justice. As for the rest of you, your secrets have been laid bare. What you do with this knowledge is your own burden. As the sound of approaching sirens echoed through the manor's windows, Poirot stepped back, his work nearly complete. The web had been tightened, the mastermind unmasked. Yet, as he glanced at Lady Eleanor's weary face, he knew the final chapter of this mystery would require one last act of judgment, a decision that would weigh heavily on his sharp mind. Chapter 10. The final order. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor with a fragile clarity. Clear, as though the Yorkshire moors themselves exhaled a sigh of relief. The mist that had clung to the estate's jagged edges for days seemed thin, revealing the stark beauty of the rolling hills beyond. Inside the manor, the air was thick with the weight of revelations, the echoes of confessions still lingering in the grand halls. Hercule Poirot sat alone in the drawing room, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, its amber glow casting long shadows across the room. Small, precise hands rested on the arms of a velvet-upholstered chair, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames, though his mind was far from idle. The little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, were weaving the final threads of the intricate tapestry that was the Blackthorn mystery. The conspirators, Charles, Vivian, Dr. Hargrove, and the butler, Mr. Grayson, had been taken into custody by the local constabulary, their faces a mix of defiance and resignation as they were led away in the pre-dawn hours. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, the orchestrator of this elaborate charade, had retired to her chambers, her regal composure fractured but intact, her plea to Poirot to protect her family's legacy ringing in his ears. The sapphire necklace, the glittering catalyst of this labyrinthian affair, had been returned to its velvet-lined case in the safe. Its cursed history now, a footnote in the manor's long saga. Yet, for Poirot, the case was not yet closed. There was a final act to perform, a delicate balance to strike between justice and mercy, between truth and the preservation of a family's honor. He rose from the chair, his movements deliberate, and crossed the room to a small mahogany table where a leather-bound notebook lay open. His meticulous notes, written in his precise, slanting script, chronicled every clue, every conversation, every subtle gesture that had led to the unmasking of Lady Eleanor's scheme. Documents, the true treasure of Blackthorn Manor. A ledger of the smugglers' network that had persisted into the modern day sat beside the notebook, their brittle pages heavy with secrets. Poirot's fingers brushed the edges of the papers, his expression unreadable. To destroy them, as Lady Eleanor had begged, would be to erase a history of crime, to shield a family from disgrace. To preserve them would assure justice for the victims of the smuggling ring, but at the cost of exposing the Blackthorn name to ruin. It was a choice that required the utmost clarity of thought, and Poirot, ever the methodical man, would not act hastily. The door creaked open, and Mrs. Clara Henshaw, the manor's housekeeper, Kita, entered with a silver tray bearing a steaming pot of tea and a single porcelain cup. Her face, lined with years of quiet service, betrayed a flicker of exhaustion, though her posture remained impeccable. "Your tea, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You'll be needing anything else before the guests?" Depart Poirot turned, his mustache twitching slightly, as he offered her a polite smile. "Nan, Madame Henshaw, you have been most attentive. But perhaps you will indulge me with the moment of your time. There are matters yet to discuss, n'est-ce si?" P.A. Clara hesitated, her hands tightening briefly on the tray before she set it down. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," she replied, while her eyes darted to the documents on the table, betraying her unease. Poirot gestured to a chair opposite him. "Please, sit. I assure you, this is no interrogation, merely a conversation between two observers of human nature. You have served the Blackthorn family for many years, have you not?" Clara nodded, easing herself into the chair with a wariness that suggested she knew more than she had ever let on. 32 years, sir. I was a girl, barely out of pinafores." "Then you have seen much," Poirot said, pouring tea into the cup with a precision that mirrored his investigative methods. "You have seen the comings and goings of this manor, the secrets kept within its walls. Tell me, Madame Henshaw, what is your opinion of Lady Eleanor's actions? Do you believe her motives were purely to protect her family's name, or is there something more?" Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers smoothing the apron over her lap. "Lady Eleanor is a proud woman," she said at last. "She's carried the weight of this family's history her whole life, and it's not been an easy burden. The smuggling, the scandals, the whispers of curses, it's all true, in one way or another. She thought she could control it, keep it buried, but secrets have a way of clawing their way out, don't they?" Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Indeed, they do. And you, Madame Henshaw, have you kept secrets of your own? Perhaps you knew of the documents of the smugglers' network that persisted under Lady Eleanor's watchful eye." Clara's gaze dropped to her hands, and for a moment Poirot thought she might deny it. But then she sighed, a sound heavy with years of silent loyalty. "I knew enough," she admitted. "Not the details, mind you, but enough to know that Lady Eleanor was tangled up in something bigger than she let on. I saw the letters come and go, the late-night visitors who weren't guests. I kept my mouth shut, because that's what you do when you're loyal. But I never thought it would come to this: thieves, poison, guns in the night." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "In the documents, Madame, did you ever see them? Did you know their significance?" "Saw them once," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Years ago, when I was cleaning the library, were hidden in a false-bottom drawer, wrapped in oilcloth. I didn't read them, but I knew they were important. Okay. Lady Eleanor caught me looking, and she told me they were old family papers, nothing more. But her eyes, they were afraid. I never spoke of it again." Poirot sat back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Merci, Madame Henshaw. Your candor is most illuminating. You have confirmed what I suspected, that Lady Eleanor's actions were not merely to protect her family's name, but to shield a living network, one that continues to operate in the shadows. And yet, she trusted you, did she not? To keep her secrets, to guard her legacy?" Clara's eyes met his, steady now. "She did, and I did my duty. But I'm glad it's over, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head, a gesture of respect. You're a woman of great integrity, Madame Henshaw. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a decision to make. As Clara rose and left the room, Poirot turned his attention back to the documents. He lifted the first page, its ink faded but legible, and read the names of those involved in the modern smuggling ring merchants, dock workers, even a minor official in the local government. It was a web that stretched far beyond Blackthorn Manor, implicating dozens in a trade that thrived on secrecy and greed. To expose it would dismantle the operation, but it would also drag the Blackthorn name through the mud, tarnishing a legacy that Lady Eleanor had fought so fiercely to preserve. He closed the notebook and stood, tucking the documents under his arm. The fire beckoned, its flames a tempting solution to the moral quandary before him. But Poirot was not a man to act on impulse. He crossed the room to the window, gazing out at the rose garden where he had unearthed the key to the vault. The roses, still in bloom despite the late season, seemed to mock the chaos that had unfolded within the manor's walls. Their beauty was a reminder that even in deception could be something worth preserving. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, and Lady Eleanor entered, her presence as commanding as ever. Though her eyes were shadowed with fatigue, she wore a simple gray dress, a stark contrast to the opulent gowns of the past few days, as though she had shed the armor of her title. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of vulnerability. I trust you have made your decision. Poirot turned to face her, his expression inscrutable. Madame, I have considered your request with great care. The documents you have guarded so jealously are a testament to the sins of your ancestors and to your own efforts to contain them. But they are also a map to justice, a means to end a cycle of crime that has persisted for generations. Eleanor's face tightened, but she did not interrupt. Poirot continued, his voice measured. You ask me to destroy them, to preserve the Blackthorn name, and I understand your reasons, your love for your family, your desire to shield them from disgrace. But I am Hercule Poirot, and I cannot ignore the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Her hands clasped together, the knuckles whitening. Okay, then you will hand them over to the authorities. You will let the world tear my family apart. Poirot held up a hand, silencing her. Non, madame. I propose a compromise. The documents will not be made public, but neither will they be destroyed. I will ensure they reach the hands of those who can dismantle the smuggling ring discreetly, without implicating your family. The Blackthorn name will remain untarnished, but the crimes will not go unpunished. Eleanor's shoulders sagged, a mixture of relief and resignation. And how can you guarantee such a thing, Monsieur Poirot? The authorities are not known for their discretion. Poirot's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. You underestimate the influence of Hercule Poirot, madame. I have friends in high places, men who value justice but also understand the nuances of human affairs. The documents will be delivered anonymously, with instructions to focus on the modern perpetrators, not the historical ones. Your ancestors' sins will remain in the shadows as you wish. For a moment, Eleanor was silent, her gaze searching his face for any sign of deceit. Finding none, she nodded slowly. You are a remarkable man, Monsieur Poirot. I misjudged you. I thought you would see only black and white, but you understand the gray. Poirot inclined his head. The world is rarely so simple, madame. Order and method, they bring clarity to even the most complex of grays. She offered a faint smile, the first genuine one Poirot had seen from her. Then I leave it in your hands. Thank you for everything. She turned to leave. Poirot called after her. One moment, madame. Sapphire necklace is safe now. Eleanor paused, her hand on the doorframe. It is. and it will remain locked away. A reminder of what greed can do. Perhaps one day it will be free of its curse. Poirot watched her go, then returned to the fire. He placed the documents in a small metal box, sealing it with a lock whose key he slipped into his pocket. The box would be sent to his contact at Scotland Yard, a man who owed Poirot a favor and knew how to handle sensitive matters with discretion. The smuggling ring would be dismantled, its members brought to justice without fanfare. Kay and the Blackthorn legacy would endure. The remaining guests gathered in the entrance hall, their bags packed, and their faces a mix of relief and unease. The colonel, or rather, the impostor who had posed as one, stood apart, his shoulders slumped, his false medals removed. Vivian, who had reappeared after her brief disappearance, was subdued, her glamorous facade replaced by a quiet introspection. Dr. Hargrove, scholarly pretense shattered, avoided Poirot's gaze, while Charles, still recovering from his wound, leaned on a cane, his expression a mix of guilt and gratitude. Poirot addressed them briefly, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had unraveled their secrets. Mesdames et messieurs, the events of this weekend will remain with you, as they will with me. You have each played a role in this drama, and you have each faced the consequences of your actions. Let this be a lesson in the dangers of greed and deception. Go now and live better lives. There were no protests, no arguments. The guests filed out to the waiting cars, their figures disappearing into the mist as the manor's heavy doors closed behind them. Poirot lingered in the hall, his eyes tracing the intricate carvings on the staircase, the portraits that lined the walls. Blackthorn Manor was a place of history, of beauty and tragedy intertwined, and he felt a pang of respect for its resilience. Mrs. Henshaw appeared at his side, her apron now replaced by a coat, signaling her own departure. "You'll be leaving soon, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked. "Oui, madame," he replied, adjusting his hat with a flourish. "The train to London awaits, and I have no desire to linger in the moors longer than necessary. But I shall carry the memory of Blackthorn Manor with me, as I do all my cases." She smiled faintly. "You've done a good thing here, sir. The manor feels lighter, somehow." Poirot nodded, his mustache curling slightly. "It is the way of things, madame. When the truth is uncovered, the shadows recede." He stepped outside, the crisp air bracing against his face, and made his way to the car that would take him to the station. The driver, a young man with a cheerful demeanor, cooted idly about the weather, unaware of the weight of the events that had transpired. Poirot listened politely, his mind already turning to the next challenge, the next mystery that would demand the attention of his little gray cells at the station. He boarded the train, settling into a plush seat by the window. The countryside rolled past, a blur of green and gold, and Poirot opened his notebook one last time. He made a final entry, his pen moving with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. The case of Blackthorn Manor is concluded. The sapphire necklace is restored. The smuggling ring will be dismantled, and the Blackthorn legacy endures, for better or worse. Human nature, with its greed and loyalty, its deception and redemption, remains the greatest puzzle of all. And yet, with order and method, even the most tangled web can be unraveled. Hercule Poirot is satisfied. He closed the notebook with a snap, his lips curving into a contented smile. Fatigued, the train whistle sounded, a sharp note that cut through the quiet, and as the carriage pulled away from the moors, Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, already dreaming of the next adventure.